What's going on, guys? Are you ready to embark on an exciting journey into the world of web development? So, welcome to this new video. In this comprehensive video, we'll dive into the powerful Angular framework, which is an open source framework for building dynamic, robust, and scalable web applications. This video is a step-by-step guide from the fundamentals to the advanced approach of the Angular framework. So in this video, we will see how to create a project, how to set up the environment, how to work with Angular, how to create services, how to consume REST APIs, and we will see all the building blocks of the Angular framework. And by the end of this video, we will consolidate all these knowledges in order to build an application from scratch and to consume a REST API and to display the data, manipulate the data, saving new objects, and so on and so forth. So stick to the video and don't miss any part. Everything in this video is so important. Before we start, I would like to invite you to check out my website where you can find premium courses about software development. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and also give me a thumbs up so we can help this channel to grow and to get to more and more people. So now, with no further ado, let's get started. Angular is an advanced open source and full-featured front-end web development framework developed and maintained by Google. It provides a comprehensive set of tools and features that enable developers to build robust and scalable web applications. Angular follows the Model View Controller, also known as MVC architectural pattern, allowing for a clear separation of concerns, promoting modular development practices. It is maintained by Google and provides a comprehensive set of tools and features for developing robust and scalable applications. Angular follows the component-based architecture where applications are built by composing reusable components. At its core, Angular leverages TypeScript as a statically typed superset of JavaScript, which enhances the development experience by adding features like static typing, enhanced code organization, and improved tooling support. TypeScript enables developers to write cleaner, more maintainable code and catch errors at compile time rather than runtime. One key feature of Angular is its powerful and extensible templating system. Angular templates use HTML enhanced with additional syntax and directives, allowing developers to declaratively define the structure and behavior of their application's user interface. Angular's two-way data binding mechanism automatically keeps the view and the model in sync, reducing the need for manual DOM manipulation. Also, Angular employs a component-based architecture where the application is built by composing reusable and encapsulated components. Each component represents a distinct part of the user interface, encapsulating its own HTML template, CSS style, and business logic. Components can communicate with each other through inputs and outputs, forming a hierarchical structure that facilitates code reusability and maintainability. Core features of Angular framework. First, we have the two-way data binding. Angular provides a convenient way to keep the data and the UI in sync automatically. Dependency injection. Furthermore, Angular provides a robust dependency injection system which helps manage the dependencies between different components and services. Dependency injection simplifies unit testings, promote loose coupling, and allow for the efficient management of shared resources and state within an application. Templating. Angular provides powerful templates that allow you to define the structure and behavior of your application's UI. Routing. So Angular includes a comprehensive set of modules and libraries such as Angular Router for managing application navigations, Angular Forms for building complex forms with data validation and manipulation, and Angular HttpClient for making HTTP requests. These modules, along with many others, are designed to address common challenges in web development, reducing the need for third-party libraries and facilitating a unified development experience. Why using Angular? First, productivity. Angular provides a rich set of features and tools that help developers build applications more efficiently, reducing the time and effort required. A large ecosystem. So Angular has a vast and active community, resulting in numerous resources, libraries, and plugins available for use. Scalability. Angular components-based architecture promotes code reusability, making it easier to scale and maintain large applications. And then performance. Angular has a built-in optimization techniques such as change detection and lazy loading to enhance application performance. Moreover, Angular provides excellent tooling support through the Angular CLI, which is the command line interface, which offers a collection of commands of scaffolding, building, testing, and deploying Angular applications. The Angular CLI automates repetitive tasks and streamlines the development workflow, enabling developers to focus on building high-quality applications. Also, Angular is a cross-platform development, so with Angular you can build applications for web, mobile, and desktop platforms using tools like Angular Materials, Ionic, and Electron. Angular versus other frameworks. Angular, React, and Vue are all popular frameworks for building web applications, and here are some key differences. So Angular is a comprehensive and opinionated framework that provides a complete solution for building large-scale applications. It has a steeper learning curve due to its extensive feature set, but it offers a robust architecture and a powerful tool out of the box. React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. It focuses on the view layer only, leaving other concerns like routing and state management to external libraries. React promotes a component-based approach and offers a virtual DOM for efficient updates. Finally, Vue.js is a progressive JavaScript framework that is designed to be incrementally adaptable. It provides a gentle learning curve, making it easier for beginners to get started. Vue offers features similar to Angular and React, but with a simpler API and smaller bundle size. So the choice between these frameworks depends on the factors such as project requirements, team expertise, and personal preferences. Now let's have a look on the Angular architecture. So first of all, modules. Angular follows modular and component-based architecture. The key components in Angular architecture are modules, which is also known with ng module. So modules are used to organize the application into logical units. Each Angular application has at least one root module, which is known as the app module. So modules can be used to encapsulate related component directives, services, and other features. And then we have components. So the components, as mentioned before, are the building blocks of Angular applications. They encapsulate the UI and behavior of part of the application. Components have templates for defining the structure and appearance of the UI and can have associated styles and logic. Then we have templates. So the templates are HTML-based views that define the structure and appearance of the UI. They can include data binding, directives, and event handling. Then we have services. So services are reusable and injectable objects that provide functionality and data to components. They are used to share data, perform business logic, and interact with external APIs or resources. And then we have dependency injection. So Angular has a built-in dependency injection system that manages the creation and injection of objects into components and services. This promotes modularity, testability, and reusability of code. Then we have data binding. So Angular provides various types of data binding mechanisms such as interpolation, property binding, event binding, and two-way binding. These mechanisms allow for streamless synchronization between the components, data, and the UI. So now let's install our development environment. So for that, we need to install mainly two things. First of all, we need to install Node.js and npm, and then we need to install Angular CLI. So first, let's go ahead and Google download Node.js. And then all you need to do is to go to the official website, which is nodejs.org/downloads, and then you can download for your operating system. But first, let me explain what Node.js is. So Node.js is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. It allows you to run JavaScript code outside of a browser, making it ideal for server-side development. When you install Node.js, it also installs npm. So npm stands for Node Package Manager. It installs it by default. So npm is a package manager for JavaScript that allows you to easily install, manage, and update third-party libraries and tools. So for people who are familiar with Spring Boot or the Java environment, so npm is the equivalent of Maven or Gradle. So in the context of an Angular project, Node.js and npm are used for the following purposes. So first, Node.js provides the runtime environment required to execute JavaScript code, including running the Angular CLI commands. Then we have npm, which is used to manage project dependencies, including Angular itself and any additional packages or libraries needed for the project. So now just go ahead, download Node.js, install it, and then you can open the terminal and make sure that you have Node.js installed. So I will show you which command to use to check that. Once you install Node.js, all you need to do is to go to your command line and type node -v. So -v just to show the version, and here you see that for me I'm installing the version 16.14.2. Also, I might recommend using NVM. NVM is a tool which stands for Node Version Manager. So it's a tool that will manage the different versions of Node if you have, or if you need to work with different versions of Node, if in case you have different projects. So once you install Node.js and you check the version using the command node -v, also you can make sure that npm is installed by typing the command npm -v. So then it will give you a version right here. So for me, for my personal configuration, I have the npm version 8.5.0. So now just go ahead, install Node.js and npm and make sure that everything works fine. And let's move on and let me show you how to install Angular CLI. After installing Node.js and npm, we need to install Angular CLI. So the Angular CLI, or the command line interface, is a powerful command line tool provided by the Angular team. So it simplifies the process of creating, building, and managing Angular projects. The Angular CLI brings several benefits to the development process. First, we have project scaffolding. The CLI provides commands to create a new project, generates components, services, modules, and more. It sets up the project structure and boilerplate code, saving time and effort. So then we have also development server. So the CLI includes a built-in development server that allows you to serve the application locally during development. It automatically rebuilds the application when changes are detected, providing a smooth development experience. And we will see that in action just in a few moments. And then we have a build optimization. So the CLI optimizes the production build by automatically bundling and minifying the code. It also generates separate chunks for lazy loaded modules, optimizing the application's performance. And then we have also testing support. So the CLI offers command to generate unit tests and run tests using popular testing framework like Karma and Jasmine. And finally, we have configuration management. So the CLI provides a centralized configuration file called the angular.json, and I will explain that just in a few moments, as I mentioned before. So this to manage various project settings such as build options, assets, and environment variables. So using the Angular CLI simplifies the development workflow and improves productivity and ensures adherence to best practices recommended by the Angular team. So now let's see in action how we can install Angular CLI. So all we need to do, install Angular. So this is the simplest command, and let's add CLI just to be sure. So automatically we will go to the official website, or we can also go to the npm.js website. So let's click on this one. And here we see that we have the Angular CLI, so the CLI tool for Angular, and here you have the description for it. And on the right hand side, you have the command that you need to execute to install Angular. So all we need to do is npm I or npm install at angular/CLI. So this will install the latest version of Angular. If you need to install a specific version, you can check the versions right here. And let's say, for example, we want to install Angular 15. So when I click on this one, you see right here that the command is slightly different. So it's again npm I for npm install, and then angular/CLI, and then we have this @ symbol, and then the version number that we want to install. So if you want to install a different version, all you need to do is to copy or to run this command in your command line. So at the time of recording this video, the latest version is the Angular 16, as you can see right here. So this is the latest one. And as I mentioned, if you type this, or if you run this npm I or npm install angular/CLI, by default, it will install the latest version. So you need to be careful, or you need to make sure which version you want to install. So now it's so simple. All you need to do is to copy this one, and then let's go to the terminal again. And here all I need to do is to paste this command and hit enter. So let's see what will happen right here. So it will start downloading all the required things. And here there is something else. I will mention it in a few seconds once this downloading is done. So here we see that we have it was already installed, but here, for example, this was installed only for the local environment or the local folder where I'm working on. But if I want to install this Angular CLI version 16 or the latest version globally for my whole system, all I need to do is to add an argument, which is -g. So if I do npm install, -g means globally, and then angular/CLI, and then the Angular CLI with the latest version will be available for the whole system. So for the people that will install Angular for the first time, you will have a different output, but for me, it's just an update because I just moved from one version to another. So that's why I have only this output. So now we have our environment set up. Let's go ahead and let me show you how to create a new Angular project. So after installing the Angular CLI, we will have a new command available for us, which is the command called ng. So ng is the command that we can use to create an Angular project, generate a component, service, module, and so on and so forth. But first, let's make sure and let's check what Angular version is installed. So here, let's do ng version. And here it will print the Angular CLI, and this is the Angular CLI version available for us. So it's Angular CLI 16.14, sorry, and it's the node version 16.42. So now I'm gonna clean this one, and then I will type the ng --help. So this will print all the ng commands that we can use. So here, as you can see, ng add a collection. So it adds support for external library to your project. We have analytics, build, cache, completion, config. So I will let you read all this right here. But the one which is important for us at this moment is the ng new. So this ng new creates a new Angular workspace. And before creating a new project or a new Angular project, make sure that you are in the correct folder or in the correct workspace that you want to work on. So let's clean this one. And here, let's say ng new, and then Angular, I will call it Angular Crash Course. And then hit enter. So now it will start building the project, but first of all, it will ask us few questions. So here, first of all, it says, would you like to add Angular routing? I will say yes, and I will explain in details routing later on. So then we need to choose which style sheet format would you like to use. So we can use CSS, which is the default one, or we can use the SCSS, SAS, or less. So for me, I'm always using CSS, SESS, and just be careful, and I need to mention that SCSS, SAS, and less, they will be transpolated later on to CSS files. So if you work with SCSS, it will be automatically converted to CSS files. So let's choose SCSS for now. And then we see that it starts creating few folders. So here first we have this readme, we have the editor, we have the git ignore, we have a file called angular.json, package.json, tsconfig, and a bunch of other files. So now at the same time it's installing the packages using npm. So the packages are located in the package.json. So as I mentioned before, for the people who are familiar with the Java environment, this is the equivalent of the pom.xml file or the build.gradle file, where you can put all the dependencies and version, and then you need to run npm install or update the project in order to install all the dependencies. So now let's wait a few seconds, but now it's already done. And here we see that packages installed successfully. So now we can use the project. Let's go ahead and open this project using our IDE. So for my case, I will be using IntelliJ. For you, if you want to use VS Code, feel free to do it, or if you want to use another IDE, feel free to do it, but nothing will change. It's just using the IDE or your preferred IDE. So now let's move on to the next part, and let me explain to you the project structure and each part of the project. After creating the Angular project and open it with your preferred IDE, and as I mentioned in my case, I will be using IntelliJ for that. So first of all, we see that we have this readme.md file, which is auto-generated by the Angular CLI. So it looks really nice and directly useful. So here it comes also with a bunch of useful information. So for example, for the development server, to run the application, all you need to do is to execute ng-serve and then navigate to this address, and so forth. So here you have a bunch of information, how to run tests, how to build a project, how to run end-to-end tests, and so forth. But first, let's start by exploring and understanding the structure of the generated project. So first we have this .idea folder, so we can ignore that and also the VS Code because they are IDE specific. But then we have the node modules folder. So here you see it in yellow because it's ignored, and it's part of the git ignore right here because it's not, or we don't need to synchronize it in case we want to upload the code to Git. So here, as I mentioned, we have the node modules folder, and this is the folder containing all the libraries that are required to run our application, including the auto-generated or like the auto-included libraries or the third-party libraries that we want to add in order to execute and develop our application. So now let's have a look on it. So we see that we have bin, we have at Angular, so we have Angular animation, CLI, common, compiler, forms, and so forth. We also have router right here. So we will use these almost all these packages later on. Also, if we scroll down, we will see a bunch of other libraries that are automatically installed by Angular CLI. So you don't need to understand or to know all the details or each library which was installed, but you need to know that when you add a new library, it will automatically be installed in this folder. So sometimes in case you have issues when you install a new library, or it doesn't pop up, or you are not able to use it, sometimes you need to clean these node modules or totally remove it and rerun npm install command again to reinstall the node modules. So then we see we have a source folder. So this is the folder containing all the resources of our application. So starting from the style.scss file, we have also the main, index, and the fav icon. So this is the fav icon, so it's like the Angular icon. Also, we have an assets folder. So this is where you can put all the assets for your application. And then we have app. So this is the main application that was generated. And here we see that we have the app routing module. So that was generated after we answered yes in the terminal prompt that we want to generate the routing module. So that was generated because of that. And then we have also the app module, which is the main module. As I mentioned before, like when you create like an Angular application should have at least one module, and by default it's the app module right here. So also we have a default component, so at least one component, which is the app component. So the component, as I mentioned before, and I will explain it later on in details. So it's composed of 4 files. So it's HTML, CSS, spec for testing, and we have the component or the TS file. So all these 4 files together, they form our component. So I will explain that in details, but first of all, let me explain the styles.scss. So here, as mentioned in this comment right here, so you can add global styles to this file and also import other styles file. So anything or any style you put in this styles.scss folder, file, not folder, this will be applied globally to the application, because when I explained before, Angular is a component-based framework. This means that each component has its own style. But if I want to apply a style globally, I need to import it, or I need to create it in this file styles.scss. And then after the source folder, we see here we have like, this is the edit configuration, this is the git ignore file. So these are like a default files. We don't need to go through them because I assume that you know what are these files. And then we have the angular.json, package.json, and the package log.json. And then these 3 files, this tsconfig, tsconfig app, and tsconfig spec, these are the configuration for TypeScript. So for example, here if you want, you can, for example, I want to source map, I want declaration to be true or false, and so on and so forth. So here, for example, you can set strict injection parameters to true or false. So this is like the compiler options, and you can play around with that. But let's focus on more important things. We can, or I can explain that in a different video if you want to. So now let's move on and let me explain this package.json and package log.json. So first of all, let's understand and let's explore the package.json file. So if I open it and then I will put it in full screen, so we see here that it's a JSON file containing a bunch of information. So here we have the name. So this is the name of the application that we already generated, and we have a version by default which is 0.0.0, and you can increase it by the time, or if you want to manage the versions. Then we have this scripts block. So these are the default scripts that are auto-generated when we create a new Angular project. And in order to execute any of these scripts, all we need to do is to run on the command line npm run and then the command that we want. So for example, if I want to start the application, all I need to do is to run npm run and then start, or ng serve. So here, so this is the command name, and this is the real command that we will execute. All right. So here, then we have build, we have watch, and we have test. So here, for example, if I go here and I try to do ng test, for example, so it's exactly the same as I run npm run test. So this ng test, it will start running all the tests that I have in my application. And then I will show you how I can use a different command, or the npm command, in order to run the same ng test. So now the tests are initiated and we have like the test up and running. So I can cover the tests in different video, but now let's focus on Angular. So I will stop this one and then I will clean the console and I will show you if I do npm and then run and then test. So here you will see that first of all it will print this ng test. So here it's running the same command that we have right here. All right, so I will close this one again. So as you can see here in the logs, it's running already the ng test command. Also, we can create our custom commands. So I'm going to clean this one again. And now I will create a custom command. So here I will say custom and then command. And for this custom command, all I need to do is echo hello world. So now in order to run this command, again is npm run and then the command name. So npm run and then custom dash command. So when I run this command, let's see what will happen in here. So here we see that we have echo hello world, and this is the command which is getting executed, which is this one, and now it's printing hello world. So in this way you can create your own custom commands. Alright, so now let's move on to the rest of this package.json file. So here we have dependencies. So these are the default dependencies that we need in order to run or to execute an Angular project. So here you see this one in yellow because my IDE is recommending that I change it to 16.1.5, but for now it doesn't matter because it's not our main focus for now. But in case you have this one, you can also increase the version. And each time you change a version, you need absolutely to rerun the npm install command in order to reinstall the new dependencies or the new version. But let's do it. Let me show it to you. So I will change this one to 16.1.5. I will change all of them and then I will show you that we need to run the npm command. So here it's always a good idea to use a good IDE because as you can see here, you can have a lot of auto completions, recommendations in order to have like your code always up to date. So now after updating or upgrading the versions, all I need to do is to run npm install or npmi. So when I run npm install, you see that it will start updating the dependencies that we have, and here we see that we have a bunch of packages that were updated. All right, so let's continue understanding and explaining these dependencies part. So as I mentioned, those are the dependencies that are required to run the application. So for example, if I need another library in order to implement the logic or to add something to my application, you need to add it in these dependencies right here. So in these dependencies, for example, let's say I want to use charts or chart.js, I need to add the chart.js into these dependencies because as you can see here, we have dependencies and dev dependencies. And I will explain to you what is the difference between dependencies and dev dependencies. So simply, dev dependencies, they have the scope development. So they run and execute only in development mode, so which is the local one. So for example, in development mode, we see that we have the Jasmine, we have Jasmine Core, we have Karma, and so on and so forth. So in production, after building and deploying the application, we no longer need the Karma, we no longer need the Jasmine because it's a phase that we need to execute before deploying the application. So these libraries are only required and needed only in development phase. So development phase, it is also, or we also need it in a pipeline, for example, in order to run all the tests and so forth. So you need to make the difference, or you need to be sure what are the normal dependencies that you need for your application. And in case you need like just a dev dependency, all you need to do is to add it to the dev dependencies right here. So that was it for the package.json file. Now let me explain to you what is this package lock.json. So the package lock.json is, as you can see, it has the same name, but it's a lock. So this means what? This means that every time you add a new dependency, this file will be updated. And here, for example, let's see, we have the node modules and we have this library, and it has a version, this one, and then it was resolved using this, and this is the registry or the SHA of this dependency, whether if it's a dev dependency or not, and so forth. So also this dependency has another dependencies, and we have like, this is the engine that was used, and so forth. So this information or this log file is really useful when you work in a team. And for example, each one of you might have different versions of Angular installed on his local system, or a different node version. So using the package log.json, it will download exactly the same dependencies and the same versions without having differences between the different collaborators and the different colleagues of your team. So the package log.json, it's as its name mentions, it's just log for the different dependencies and their corresponding versions. The angular.json file is a configuration file used by Angular CLI to manage various settings and options for Angular project. It is generated automatically when you create a new Angular project using the CLI. The angular.json file contains a JSON object with different properties and configurations that define how the project is built, bundled, and served. So let's explore some of the most important sections and properties in the angular.json file. So first of all, we have the project sections. So this section contains project-specific configuration. By default, it includes a configuration for the main project, usually named project name, and as you can see here, it's Angular Crash Course. So here we have the project type, which is application, and we have the schematics, which is containing, for example, the styling that we chose, which is SCSS. And for example, if you want to modify it from SCSS to less or to CSS or anything else, all you need to do is to change it here. And of course, don't forget to update or change the files or the styling files that you have in your application in order to be coherent with the configuration. Then we have the root property, which specifies the root directory of the project. So here it's empty, like because as you can see, the angular.json is in the root of our root folder. And then we have the source root, which is src, and src is this folder right here. So this specifies the source code directory within the project. And then we have this prefix information, or this prefix property. So this is the prefix that will be added each time you add a new component. So for example, if I create a component called component1, so the selector of this component will be app-component1. Then we have the architect property. So this section contains configuration for different build and development tasks, such as build, serve, test, extracting I18N or internationalization, which is like the multi-language support for the application, or also we can add linting and so forth. So first, let's go ahead and check what we have in the build. So this build defines the build configuration of the project. It includes options like the output path, which is the output directory for the build artifacts, assets, where we have, so I'm talking about these assets right here. So the assets is the files to copy to the output directory. We have also styles. So this is the CSS or the SCSS files to include in the build. And we also have scripts, and which is the JavaScript or TypeScript files to include in the build. And then we have also a bunch of configuration. So here, for example, if we want to build with the argument production, it will build with this configuration that you can see right here. Also, when we run it or when we build it for development, it will be built with these properties. And here you can see that we have the default configuration for the building is by default production. So when you do ng build or npm run build, it will automatically build for production. So then if we check serve, for example, here we see that we have, this is the builder that will be used to build the application or to serve the application. And here we see that we have a bunch of configuration, and we also have a default configuration. So by default, when you do or when you run the command ngserve, it will use by default the development environment. And here we see that we have a bunch also a bunch of configuration. So here, for example, when you do ngserve with the configuration production, it will run or it will build the application, as you can see it here, Angular crash course, build, and then production. And then we have the same for development, and it will build it for the development environment. And as I mentioned before, by default it will be development. So when you run the command ngserve, it will build and start the application as a development configuration. And then the same for the i18n. So here we have also the builder, so which is like the extract i18n, and we will be using the build Angular builder. And then we have also some options, and it will be running Angular crash course and then the target build. And finally, we have the test right here. So it will be using the Karma builder. You can change it if you want to use something else. And also here we have a bunch of options, and also we have a TS configuration. So this will point to the tsconfig.spec.json file, which is this one right here. And then we have like inline style language with a CSS because it was mentioned before. And then we have also the assets, the styles, and the scripts that will be used for the testing. So for example, if you include a new styling, don't forget to mention it also in the tests in order to have your tests running successfully. So this is a global overview of the application structure. Now let's move on and start creating our first component, and let's understand what is a component, and let's play with components first. Now let's understand how an Angular application is really bootstrapped. So first of all, we see and we explain that we have this app module component, and we have this app.module.ts, and we have this app component. So the app component is the main component, and the app module is the default, and the module which is created by default when you create a new Angular project. So then we see that in here in this file. So let's start one by one. Now let's understand the app.module.ts. So in this file, we see that we have just a class right here that contains no declaration, no logic, but we have a decoration right here. So the decoration is this annotation we are using right here, ng module. So when you use this ng module annotation on a class level, this means that you want to mark this class as a module. And when you create a module, there is a bunch of information that you need to provide. So here, first we need to have the declarations. So the declarations is the part where we declare the different components of our module. So as we mentioned, an Angular application can be a modular application, and we can have more than one module within our application. So here for the module, we can create services, components, functions, and so on and so forth. So in case we create components, we need to declare the components in the declarations part. And then after that, we have the imports. So the imports is the part when or where we use, we need to import the different modules or the other modules that we want to use. So for example, as you can see here, for using the browser, we need to import the browser module, and to use the routing, to have routing in our application, so to be able to navigate between the different pages. So we need also to import the app routing modules. And then we see that we have a list of providers. So the providers are the services that we want to use or we can use within our module or application. So for example, I have my custom service. So if it's not provided, or even if I'm using a third-party service from a third-party library, so if it's not provided in the root of my application, and I will explain what does mean provided in root. So we need to provide it in the providers right here.
And then we have this bootstrap property. So this bootstrap property is to tell what is the bootstrap component and what is the first component that I need to run when I execute my Angular application. So as I mentioned, by default, it's the app component that we have right here. So if I navigate, it will navigate me directly to this component. So this is the app.module.ts. Now let me explain to you how this app.module.ts is used to in order to bootstrap the whole application, because now we spoke about a specific part, but let's see the global image of this. Now let me explain to you how an Angular application starts up. So here we see that we have this index.html file and this main.ts file. So let's first open this index.html, and here we see that we have the title of our application which refers automatically the application name that we created in the beginning. And then we have the meta, we have the link, which is pointing to the fav icon. And then we have this app root. So this app root points to this one, to the app component.ts. So here, let's go back to the index.html. So by default, we include the app root. So that's why when we start the application, we directly and automatically see the app component.html. But let me explain to you from the TS side how this application is loaded. So the application is fully loaded from this line right here. So let me now explain to you the different functions. So first of all, we see that we have this platform browser dynamic. So this function is part of Angular's platform specific bootstrap process. It is used to dynamically bootstrap an Angular application in a browser environment. And then we have the bootstrap module, and we pass as a parameter the module that we want to initialize. So the bootstrap module function is used to bootstrap the main module of your Angular application. In this case, it is bootstrapping the app module, and the app module is the root module of your application, which is responsible for bootstrapping other modules and setting up the application component, services, and other dependencies, as I explained before. So here we are talking about this part right here. And then we have the catch. So this catch function, or this catch block, this is the one or the block that handles any errors that occur during the bootstrapping process. If an error occurs, it is logged to the console using the console.error, as we can see in here. So this is useful for troubleshooting and debugging process. So this code is responsible for starting the Angular application by bootstrapping the app module and handling any errors that may occur during the process. It initializes the application and kicks off the Angular framework to render the application's component and starts the application lifecycle. So now, since we understood how the application gets started, now let's move on to the next part. But now, before moving to the components and playing with the Angular components, let's run the application and see the output. So I'm going to clean this one. And in order to run the application, you have two options. The first option is using the command that we have right here. So which is the npm run start, and it will run like implicitly and behind the scenes. It will execute the ngserve command, or you can directly execute the ngserve command. So here you need to make sure that you are in the correct folder. So for me, that's why I'm using the terminal of the IDE, just to avoid this kind of issues. So let's do ngserve and hit enter. And now let's start having a look on the logs. So first of all, it will start compiling. So here you see the generating browser application bundle and phase setup. So the first phase is setting up, and then it will build the application, and then it will serve it and make it available for us. So here, as you can see, we have like these are the initial chunks, and these are the files that were compiled. And here we see that Angular Live development server is listening on localhost 4200. Open your browser on this address right here.
And here you see that you have compiled successfully, means that you don't have any compilation issue. So now if I go to the browser and navigate to the localhost 4200 and just hit enter, you will see that you have this interface. So this is like a default interface or default HTML template generated by the Angular CLI. And here like you have some useful links, the CLI documentation, how to learn Angular, also Angular material, you have the blogs, the dev tools, and so on and so forth. And here you have like these next steps, what you can do, for example. So here, in case you want to generate a new component, you see that you have the command right here, ng generate component xyz. And for example, for Angular material, if you want to add the Angular material to your application, all you need to do is to run this command ng add angular/material, and so on and so forth. So also you have like a bunch of commands that you can start with. Also here you see that you have the build for production, and we only use the ng build because by default we have the target production. Also we can run the tests and so on and so forth. So this is the command we executed previously together. So now let's go back and have a look on the code. So let me reduce this one. And then if we navigate to the source folder and then app, and then we have the app component.html. So this is all the HTML code that we see displayed in the browser. All right. So then we have the app component.scss. So this is where we can define extra styles for our application. And then we have the app component.ts file. So here you see that we have this title, and then this title, this is the one displayed as a title for our application. So this is the one right here. So it's the Angular crash course app is running. And let's go ahead and have a look on this one. So if I open the HTML file and if I search for title, so you see here in this line that we have this span, and then we have the title app is running. So now, for example, if I change this one, so let's say Alibu application, and now if I go back, I don't need to refresh because it will be refreshed automatically. We have here Alibu application app is running. So this is the two-way binding or the data binding. I will explain it in details in a few moments. So now after running the application, we can start by performing a cleanup. So we don't want to have this UI, we want to create our own UI. So let's first of all start by cleaning up this one. So let's go back to our IntelliJ, and then let's open the app component.html, and then I will start from the line. I will leave the router outlet here because we need it for later on, and I will explain it later. And now I can remove everything. So now I will delete this, and for example here if I add a p or a div, hello, and then if I say title, so the title is the one that we have in our app component.ts. So now if I go back to the browser, let's see the changes. So here we have hello Alibu application. Alright, so now we started the application. Let's start by understanding what is a component, how to create a component, how to communicate between components, and so forth. Before we start playing with components, let's first understand what a component is. So components are the fundamental building blocks of Angular applications. They encapsulate the UI and behavior of a part of the application. So components are reusable, modular, and self-contained, making it easier to develop, test, and maintain code. So in Angular, a component consists of three main parts. First, we have the template. So the template defines the structure and appearance of the component's UI, and it uses HTML along with Angular-specific syntax to bind data, handle events, and render dynamic content. Then we have the class. So the class contains the component's logic and data. It is written in TypeScript and includes properties, methods, and lifecycle hooks. And then we have metadata. So the metadata is defined using decorators, and it provides Angular with information about the component, such as its selector, template, styles, and dependencies.
In order to create a component, all we need to do is to use the Angular CLI to generate a new component, and we can achieve that by using the following command: ng generate, or you can also just use ngg just for a shortcut for generate, and then component and then component name, and this will create 3 parts. So these commands generate the necessary path files for the component, including the component class, template, style, and unit tests file. So in the component class, you can define properties, method, and lifecycle hooks specific to the component's functionality. In the template, define the HTML structure and use Angular's data binding syntax to display component data and handle events. To use the component in another component or template, import the component class and include its selector in the HTML, and then you can pass data to a component using input properties and receive data from a component using output properties. So these properties facilitate component communication, which we will discuss in more details in the next section. Angular provides a set of lifecycle hooks that allow you to tap into different stages of the component's lifecycle. So these hooks provides methods that are automatically called by Angular at specific point during the component's creation, update, and destruction. So some commonly used lifecycle include the following. So first we have the ng-on-init, but first of all, when we create a component, the first thing is the constructor is running. So we instantiate the object using the constructor. And then we will listen on the ng-on-change the first time, and then we init the component. So the ng-on-init, this hook is called after the component has been initialized and its property have been set. So it is commonly used to perform initializing logic. So for example, if you need to fetch data from the database or from an API and have this data ready before rendering the full component, all you need to do is to put that in the ng-on-init. Then we have the ng-on-change. So the ng-on-changes. So this hook is called when one or more of the component's input properties have changed. So it receives an object containing the previous and the current value of the input properties. So the onChanges hook will always listen to any change that will happen to any property of your component. And then finally, we have the onDestroy. So this hook is called just before the component is destroyed. It is used to clean up resources and subscribe from observable or perform any necessary cleanup tasks. So for example, if you are subscribing to some observables and you want to unsubscribe, or for example to remove or to reset some data, you need to do that on the destroy, like when the component gets destroyed. So understanding and utilizing lifecycle hooks enable you to perform actions at specific points in a component's lifecycle. Now let's see Angular components in action. So the first thing that we will need to do is to create a new component. So let's open our terminal right here. And as I mentioned before, I will be using the IntelliJ or my IDE terminal because I feel much comfortable having everything in one place. So the command I will execute is ng generate, or as I mentioned before, we can use the shortcut using just ngg, and then components, since we want to generate a component, and then the component name. So let's say my dash first dash component or comp. So let's call it just like that. When you hit enter, we will see few logs. So, and then let's analyze the logs, let's understand them together, and then we will move on to update and create our component and make it look a bit nice. All right, so here you see that we have 4 creates. So this created like first one CSS class, HTML, spec.ts, and one TS file. So as I mentioned before, so here it will create it automatically here. So under app. So here, even you see here, we are directly under Angular Crash Course. So we are in the root folder, but when you create a component, it will be automatically created under the app folder. So here we see that from the changes right here from the Git history. So we have this folder, my first comp, and then we have these 4 files, HTML, SCSS, spec.ts. So this is the test file where we need to write unit tests for our component. And then we have the component.ts file. But this is not the only change. We see here that the app.module.ts has been also changed. So let's check this one first of all. So here we see that we have a change in the line 6. So here we have an import my first comp component. So here you need to be careful. When you create a component, you don't need always to add the keyword component, because it will be a suffix always by Angular. So when you use the Angular CLI to create a component, it will always add the component suffix. And then you see here in this ng module, so this is the app.module.ts. We have, so this is just a decorator, and we have a bunch of properties. So these properties, we have first of all the declaration. This is where we need to declare all the components of our application. So every time you create a component, so if you use the CLI, it will be automatically updated and it will be automatically added to these declarations. Otherwise, if you don't do that automatically or using the CLI, because you can just create your folder right here and create the different files that you want. So once you do that, you need to come to this app.module.ts, and then don't forget and be sure to declare your component in the declaration of your module. All right. So then let's take the chance and explore a little bit the app.module.ts, and then we see that we have this imports property. So this imports here, we need to import or to add all the modules that we need for our application. So for example, here we see that we have the app routing module, which refers to this file right here, and I will explain it later on when we come to the routing part. And then we have a list of providers. So the providers are the services that we want or we can use within our application. It might be a third-party service which is not injected in the root of our application or which is not automatically available, so we need to inject it in the providers. So we will see that also in details later on when we come to the services part. So now let's go back to our component, and then here we see that by default we have my first component or my first comp works. So let's run the application again. So I will use again the command ng-serve. Let's leave the application running, and now let's go back to our component. So here we see that when you create a component, first of all, we have this P or this paragraph tag right here with the name of the component and then works. So now let's have a look on the TS file. So the TS file is completely empty. So now if you want to mark a TS file or TypeScript file as the controller of your component, so this is where we put all the logic. All we need to do is to add this component annotation. So this component annotation takes an object. So first of all, we need to put the selector or to choose the selector of our application. And as you can see here, we have app dash the name of our component. So this app right here, this is the one that we saw previously in the angular.json file, which is this one. So this prefix. So if you change this prefix right here and create a new component, so the selector will change. For example, if you put it to Alibu, and then the selector will become Alibu dash my first component. And then we have the template URL. So for template URL, we have two options. So the first one, whether you point it to the HTML file where you have your template URL. Otherwise, you can, if for example, you have a small component that doesn't require an HTML page, and for example, let's imagine you want to create your custom and your own button. So all you need to do is to use template instead of template URL, and then you can provide your HTML code right here. So we will see that later on. And then we need to provide the style URLs. So as you can see here, the style URLs is a list of styles. So here by default, it will point to the main style, which is this one, the one that was automatically generated. But if you have, for example, another style which you want it to be shared between some components, you can also import it in here. So this is a global overview of our component that we created. Now let me show you in the next part how we can include a component and display it in an HTML page. So now I will have my IntelliJ and the web browser side by side to show you how you can use or how you can include and import a component inside another component. So here we have my first component or my first component, which is ready to use. And here, just to remind you, this text comes from the app component. So here, if I make this one widescreen, you see that we have hello and then the title, and the title equals Alibu application. So now in order to include or in order to display the app, my first component into this page, all I need to do is to add a tag, and this tag should have the name of the selector of the component. So here, as you can see, I have the auto completion right here, and here it says that I can use the app my first comp. So I will use it and I will close it right here. And here, just to show you that you have the automatic reload. So here directly we see that we have my first comp work. So again, I want to remind you that the app my first comp is the selector or is this selector of our component that we recently created. So in this way, we can include a component or we can display a component inside another component. So here, since we have our app component and this is the main component which is automatically loaded or firstly loaded by Angular, so we need to include it here. But later on I can show you how you can make a more complex application and a more detailed Angular application. Let's go step by step. In the background, I created a simple form which has 3 fields: name, email, and a message. And then we have a block to display the message that we want. So, and I created also the respective CSS for that to make the form looks a bit good. So let's have a look how this is gonna be. So the form looks exactly like this. So here we have a simple form, we have the name, email, message, and then we have the form data. So what we want to do in the next parts now, so I want, first of all, every time I fill this information and click submit, I want to display this data in here. So first of all, let me show you how we do data binding. So this means how to bind data from the HTML and the TS file. So first of all, the first thing that we need to do, we need to declare 3 variables, one for the username, one for the email, and another one for the message. So let's go ahead and do that. So here in TypeScript, in order to create a variable, first the variable name, let's say name, and then we have the type. So, and then we can even initialize this one directly. So as I mentioned, we will have 3 fields: name, email, and a message. So now let's create the second one, email of type string2, and let's initialize it to an empty value. And then we have message, also of type string and equals an empty string. So now we need to map this, or we need to do a binding between the TS file and the HTML file. So in this case, we need to tell Angular so which fields goes to which input from the HTML. So first of all, we have, as I mentioned here, we have this form. So here we have the simple form, and then we have a form tag, and inside that we have the form and the labels that we saw already on the UI. So now, in order to do that, let's add something. So here I will add something like this, and then parentheses, so this symbol, and then parentheses, and then we need to use an attribute called ngModel. So ngModels, and then equals then the attribute that we have in our TypeScript file. So as you can see here, So here we have the auto completion already. So if you have the full version of IntelliJ, the ultimate version, you will see the auto completion right here. So when I click on name, now if I want to navigate, and if I click on control and then navigate, and always you see the shortcuts that I'm using in this green pop-up down there. So it's pointing directly to the name. All right. Okay, so let's go back here. So now this ng model just for now just looks red because of my IntelliJ configuration. But if you want to use the forms, or if you have forms and you want to use the ng model, you need to pay attention to one thing. You need to go to the app.module.ts, and then you need to import forms module. So here, all you need to do in the imports, just search for forms module, and then you will import it, because these properties right here and this attribute comes from the forms module. So let's go ahead and continue mapping the others. So first we have the email, the name, and then the email, and finally we have the message. So here let's change it, email and then message. All right. So now when we type something, it will be automatically binded to this variable right here. And to show you how it looks like, so here we see that we have this div. So this is the div that where we will be displaying the data of the form. So here we have form data, name, email, and so on and so forth. So here, for example, I want to display the name. So we need to do some kind of interpolation. So to do that, we need to use this symbol. So this symbol 2 times, like opening and then closing, and then you can refer the variable from the TS file. And here there is something super important you need to know. So this variable should be public or without any accessor right here. So if I make it private here, you will see that the IntelliJ or the IDE will highlight it first, and then private field name cannot be resolved from the component template when using the AOT compiler. So AOT stands for ahead of time compiler. All right. So now you know the information, and you know that you always need to make it public. So now let's go ahead and open our browser and see what is the impact of this small change that we did right here. So first of all, we mapped this one, and then we displayed this form right here. All right. So now I have my form. Now if I type something in here and then Alibu, so here we see that we have nothing populated because there is something wrong that we did not mention in here. So first, let's click on F12 to open the console of our browser. And here we see that we have already an exception. So the exception says if ng model is used within a form tag, either the name attribute must be set or the form control must be defined as standalone in ng model options. So this because we are missing something important here. So here we need to add a name for our input. So here let's give it a name for example, and here let's give it the name email, and here let's give it the name message. All right, so now let's refresh the application. So it's automatically refreshed. Now if I type something here, Alibu, so you notice that every time I type something, it automatically gets populated in here. So for example, if I type my email, so the email we did not display it, so let's go ahead and display the email. So the same way we use the interpolation, and let's display the email. So here, so I have Alibu as a name, and then contact at alibucoding.com. So here you see that every time I type something in here, it automatically gets changed in here. So this is what we call the 2 ways data binding. So any change you do in this form, it will get populated and it will be saved automatically to this variable, and vice versa. So vice versa means, for example, if I say Alibu test in here, and then for the email, let's say test@mail.com. And then if I refresh the page, you will see that by default, we'll have this value in these fields. So this is the 2-way binding. So from HTML to TS file, and from TS file to HTML. So now I hope this is clear. So now let me show you how we can add an event to the form, or even an event to this submit button. Now let's empty these variables right here. Let's initialize them to empty values, and then let's go back to our HTML page, and then let's first start by adding an event to our form. So in Angular, in order to add an event, we need to use parentheses and then the event name. So for example, like most of the events, they start with ng, like the Angular events, but we can also have the default events like click and so on and so forth. But for example, for a form, it's ng submit. So here, let's call it on submit, for example. So this will look for a method called on submit in the TS file. For now, we don't have this method. Even the IntelliJ or the IDE is telling that we don't have, or this is unresolved function or method on submit. So let's go ahead and click on create on submit. And now you see that this method, so creating a method is in TypeScript is quite simple. So it's just the method name and then parentheses, and then if you have parameters, and then just the curly braces. So then if we go back in here, so let's just start by logging the information of the data we have right here. Before that, okay, so let's keep them. I was just thinking about removing this name and email, but let's keep them. So here I want to console log. So to console log, all we need to do is to use the command console.log and then the information that we want to use. So now in order to access one of the public attributes or even the private attributes of this TS file or TS class, we need first this keyword and then dot, and then we will be able to access all the variables, fields, methods, and so forth. So here let's display, for example, the email, but I want to display or the console log, the name only when I click on the submit button. So let's go ahead and try this. So here, like my page is automatically refreshed. So I will just click, hit the F12 button, and now I'm on the console. So here I will type Alibu as a name, and now we see that we have nothing yet. So when I click on submit, so here, like I was in this error, all right, but I need to display the info. So let me clean it and click on it again. So here we see that we have Alibu. So if I make it just a little bit bigger, so we see that we are printing the first name or the name here. So if I change something else, so for example, if I do test and click submit, we see that we are logging test. So here we have the event working on the submit, and this is because we have the form tag right here, and the type of this button is submit. So if I change the type of this button to button, for example, and refresh the page and click on submit, and I type something, click on submit, as you can see, nothing is displayed in here, because the type or the button type submit is the one responsible of submitting the form. So let's bring it back to submit, and then let's make sure that our logic is working fine, so that we have the information displayed. So now we have, or we saw how we can add an event to a form. So for example, now if I want to delegate this submit to the button, so okay, it's a submit button, but I want to console log the data or the information only when I click the button, even if it is of type button and not type submit. So let me show you how to do that. So first I will just remove this one from here because I don't want to submit from the form, or I can even completely remove this form right here. Okay, so this is the power of Angular. So we are so much flexible. And here in this button, all I need to do is to add an event, and we need the click event. So here, let's call again the onSubmit method, but now when we click on the button. All right. So let's go ahead and try it again. So let's type something, let me clean the console, and now let's click on submit, and we see that we have this information again. All right, so now we learned how to add events to our form components. So here, for example, if I want to add a key down or a change event on the input, I can also do that. So let's try this also. So I will bring this back. So I will just bring it to the ng form, but now on the I will remove it from here first, but now I want to add another event. So let me just inline this one. All right, so I just inlined this one to have more space to write. So now, for example, if I want to capture the event or to capture the details of my input, or what am I typing inside the input each time, so I can use one of the events. So as I mentioned before, to add an event, all we need to do is like parentheses and then the event name. So for example, let's try the key down or the key up, or like let's go with the key down. And for the key down, I want to do on submit. So here, just to remind you, the on submit is only used on this key down, and we removed it from the button. Also, we removed it from the form. So now I will just display the data or console log the name only when I type something in the name input type. All right, let's go ahead and try it. So now the application is refreshed. I will clean the console, and then if I type something, you see that we have the data getting displayed. All right, each time I type something, I'm console logging the information. All right, that's good. Now you understood how events works. So let's move on and add something nice to our application. So this form data, I want to display it only when I fill this form and I hit the submit button. I want to display this form with the data that I filled right here. So let's go ahead and do that. So now what we want to do, we want to hide this block right here and display it only when we click on the submit button, and maybe we can add a validation to check that we have the name, email, and message, and then we display the block. So first of all, let's go ahead and let's create a variable right here, and let's call it is submitted equals false. So here, for example, is submitted equals false. This means that this variable is of type Boolean, or we can also do Boolean equals false. Like both of them are correct, so you can choose the way you want to use it. Now we will see a directive which is really used in Angular applications. So it's the conditional directive. So here we want to use an ngIf, or we want to display this block if this submitted equals true. All right. So now let's go ahead, and here to use the ngIf, or if to use an if condition, it's star and then ngIf equals and then the condition. So here our condition should be of type Boolean. So in this case, we have our is submitted variable, and it's by default equals false. So now if I go back here, you will see that we no longer have this block form data. And also there is something important you need to understand is that this block right here does not exist at all in the code. So for example, let me make this one a little bit bigger and go to elements, and we see here in these elements we have only, this is our app root, and then the app, my first component, and then this is the div block that we have, and then we have the form. So we don't have anything else. So here we see that we have bindings, ngReflect, ngIf, and the result of the if is false. So that's why it's not displayed yet. All right. So if I switch this first component, or is submitted, to true, and then reload the page, you will see that now we will have the tag in the DOM. So here we see that we have form, and now we have this element, and here it's mentioning also that the ngReflect ngIf is equals true. All right, so this is something really important. So if you use ngIf, this means that if the condition is false, the block will not be rendered at all. All right, so now let's go back and continue with our implementation. All right, so I will bring this back to false, and then I guess now you understand how things will be working. So we have this condition right here. Since we have the two-way binding, every time we change the value of this is submitted, it will be automatically changed from the two ways. So again, let me bring this ng on submit. So let's make it on submit, and now we can remove this key down. So now I will go to the on submit method, and here every time I click on the submit, I will switch the value of this is submitted from false to true. So this dot is submitted equals true. So now if I go back here, and let me make this one bigger. Now if I type, for example, Alibu, and then for example ali@mail.com, and here's some message, and if I click on submit, let's see what will happen. So here we have the form data is getting displayed, but we just forgot to add to display the message. Let's do it really quick. So here let's display message, and now let's go back and try again. So here I will just put any dummy values and then click submit, and we see here that we are submitting the data and we are displaying the information in this form data. All right, so now you understood how this ngIf works and how you can play and display the data. Now let's see how we can loop over a data. This means I will add a table right here. So I will just do it in the background so we don't waste time in just seeing HTML. But I will create a table right here containing name, email, and message. And each time we click on the submit, I want to display the new element in this table right here. So let's go ahead and do it. All right, so I adjusted the UI and now I created a table right here. So for now, it just contains this information. And then what we want to do is each time we insert some data and submit from this submit button, I want to add a new line in this table. So the HTML is here, so you can find it in the source code. But now let's move on to the most important part, which is how to implement this logic. So first of all, the first thing that we need to do, I'm gonna make this one full screen, is we need to create a table. Okay, we need to create an array. Let's say messages, and then it will be of type array, or you can make it like a table of any. So here we can say any for now. So like it will be a table of any object, and I will initialize it to an empty table. All right, so now each time we click on this button, on the submit button, and we invoke the onSubmit method, I want to insert a new object in my messages table. All right, so let's do it. So now every time we submit this form, as you can see right here, so we have the ng submit and then we have the onSubmit method. So every time I click on submit, I want to insert a new element. So to do that, it's so easy. So it will be this dot messages equals or a push. So like with tables, to push or to insert an element, we use a method called push. So since it's a table of any, so I can insert any object I want. So here I want name. So let's make it like that. And then this dot name. And then, so we want to insert a JSON structure or a JSON format into this table. And then I want to have email and then this dot email. And finally, I want to have my message and then this dot message. So this is like a simple JSON format. All right, so every time I click on submit, I will set the submitted to true and then push a new element. So here let's console log. So let me show you how to console log easily and quicker. So you can do this dot messages dot log and then click on the tab, so it will automatically autocomplete this. So let's go ahead, let's go back here. I will click on F12. So this is my console. I will zoom out a little bit. I will clean it. And then let's try this out. So here, let's say Ali, Ali, and Ali, and then we click on submit. So here we see that we have a table right here. So I'm gonna make this one just a little bit bigger like this. So we see that we have our first element, Ali, 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 and then let's say, for example, Alibu, and then Alibu, and then Alibu. So if I click submit again, so we see that the table now contains two elements. And here we see that we have Ali, the first one, and Alibu, which is the second one. All right, so now we saw that we are inserting and pushing the data into this on submit. So let's again go ahead and display all this information in our table. All right, so I can close this one, and now I need to go back to my HTML template, and then let's go down to the table. All right, so here what we need to do, we need to have this one or this part static, and then for each element of my messages table, I want to display them as rows. Okay, so you know in HTML a full row is a tr tag and a colon is td. So tr is for table row and td is for table colon or table, something like that. All right, so in order to do that, so in here we need to use another directive like the ngIf, but now this one is called star ng4. All right, so equals. So for this ng4, we need to do let and then the variable name or the object that we want to call it. Let's call it, for example, msg of what? So this is an object of messages. All right, so as you can see here, messages is of type array of any. So let's choose messages, and then here you see instead of this td we will use instead of this static value we will use interpolation. So we use the curly brackets 2 times and we close 2 times the same. So then we need to do msg dot and then we have name. So the name will refer this name right here and email and then message. All right, so let's do this again. So it will be also msg.email and finally msg.message and then message. So now if I try to test this, so if I insert anything and do submit, we see that we have this information. So now if I say Ali, and Ali, submit, we see that it gets automatically populated and we see it directly, like immediately in our table. All right, so here just don't care about this underlying or like this error showing here. This is because of my IDE. So yeah, all right, so now this is how we can use an ng4. So for example, let's say I want to have an index in the first column. So here I would say I will add a th and then let's call it just dash, just for the number. And here I want to insert the number of or the index of each element that I have right here. So for example, if I do something like this, I want to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so in order to do that, all I need to do, like let's add a semicolon right here, and then we say let e, for example, or like the variable name equals index. So when we use index, it will automatically get the index of our column. So now we can use this I variable in order to display the number or the occurrence of our element. So let's try it out. So here let's add any element. So here we see it's 0 because the index always starts from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. So for example, if I wanted to start from 1, I can say just plus 1. All right, so let's try this again, and then we can move on. So here it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. So this is how you can use an ng4. So now we know that our messages object or messages array is an array of any. We can also, for example, later on transform this object to a model or to a class or an interface and use a proper type here instead of using any. But for now it's okay. We can move on and see what we can see next.
Angular provides mechanism for communicating between components, allowing data to flow from parent components to child component and vice versa. So here, as you can see in this diagram, we have two things. We have inputs and we have outputs. So input property allow you to pass data from a parent component to a child component. So to define an input property, use the input annotation or the input decorator before property declaration in the child component class. So the parent component can then bind to this property and pass data to the child component. And then we have the output. So the output properties combined with events enable communication from a child component to a parent component. So to define an output property, use the @output decorator before an event property declaration in the child component class. So the child component can emit events using the output property, and the parent component can listen to those events and respond accordingly. So by leveraging input and output properties, you can establish effective communication and data exchange between components within your Angular application. Now we will see how we can communicate to components. So like what I mean here, so how, for example, from a parent component, send information to a different component and be able to display it. So before we do that, let's first go ahead and create a new component, and let's call it, for example, in this case, I will use the same command ng component, and then I will call my component message details, or message detail as you like. So here, this will be a component just to display the details. Instead of displaying the information in the table, we will create another component in order to display the information or the details of each message. So just to remind you, here we have our table. Now I will comment out this part, and then we will use this new component right here. So first of all, let's go ahead and comment the table. So in this one, I will just do like this, select it, and then you can go to code, and then you have comment with block comment. So now we no longer have the table. Even if I click on submit, we don't have the table. All right, so now let's go ahead and let me put some HTML and some styles to this element right here, and then I will explain it to you. All right, so in this message details component, I just created a simple HTML page or HTML component containing a div with a class message card, message header, and here it contains like the details. It will be the title or the name, and then we have the email, and finally here we have the message content. So here you can see also the CSS style that I used, and that's it. So you can find everything in the source code of this application. And then let me show you how we did in my first component. So if we go back here, what I did after commenting out this part, so here what I did is I created a div, and I gave it a flex container. So it will be a display flex direction row, and justifying the content with the space between, and flex wrap to be able to go back to a new line every time we have or we reach the limit of our width container. All right, so now you know how we can integrate or how we can display a component in another component. So in this case, my first component will be the parent component of any message details component that we want to use. So here, all we need to do is app message details. So now if I refresh the page, you see that this is how our message details looks like. So it looks like exactly like this. And if I duplicate it, for example, a few times, now it looks exactly like this one. All right, so maybe we can increase a little bit the width. So let's go ahead and do it in live. So let's say like I want the width of my card to be 120. So 120 seems to be too much. So 110. So it looks a little bit nicer. All right, also you can play with the styles. So for example, if I don't put this space between, so it will look a little bit nicer, or like it will have more space. But if you increase a little bit this one, you will see that also you will have more space and more data. All right, so but this is not the most important part for us. Like the most important is to have something displayable. Now let's move to the best part of this section. So now I want to display the information as we did before in this part right here. I want to display the information of each message inside this one. And of course, I want to display it only when I have my message
my form submitted. So I will just copy this ngIf and put it in here. So now we have again this ngIf, and now if I type something and click submit, so it gets displayed. All right, so for now we are good. And let me also remove all this. I will leave only one component. And then what we need to do, we need again our ng4. So we want to loop over the list of messages that we have, since we have the logic in this onSubmit method. So every time we submit, we are pushing our element to this messages table. All right, so now I will scroll down and then I will go back here. So this is a component. So this is a normal tag. So within a component, we can also add our directive ng4. So this ng4, it will loop over the messages, and each time it will create a new message details component. So if I refresh the page and type anything, now if I click submit, every time you will see that we have a new element getting displayed. But now what we're still missing is how can I display the information, this information right here in this element. So in this case, let me show you how to do that. So let's go to our message details component.ts file. I'm going to make it full screen. And then also I can remind you that here we are sending an object of these messages. And this messages is an array of any, but we know that we are passing, or we are inserting a JSON having name, email, and message as the keys of my object. All right, so now if I go back to my message details component, here I want to create an object. I will call it message, and I will say it's of type any, and I also can initialize it to an empty one. So now in order to tell Angular that this is an element that I want to receive it from the parent, all I need to do is to add an annotation called input. So when I say that this is an input, so this means that I will receive this as a parameter from the parent component, which is any component that wants to include or to display this message details component in it. All right, so now if I go back here to my first component, and then I will go back to a new line, I will make it full screen, and then if I use this symbol and then I type message, so here you see that this message, and then if I click on it, so it will navigate me to this one. All right, so this message is the input that I want to pass, and this message is exactly this variable. So if I say msg right here, so it will pass this msg as an input from the parent, which is my first component, to the child, which is the message details component. Now I can go back to the message details component.html file, and now I will be able to access, so I can close this one, I will be able to access this element right here, or this variable right here, and display the different information. So the first one, it will be my message dot name, for example, and then the second one will be message dot email, and finally the details here, so it will be message dot message. So let me double check what is the name of this input. So if I go back here, so it's called also message. So here it will be message.message. And now I can test my application, and you will see that we will display each time this information inside this place right here. So let's refresh. So here if I say Ali at mail.com, and then some message, and I click on submit. So you see here that I have my component. So this is the name, this is the email, and this is the message that I displayed. So here, let's say, for example, some new message, and here let's say Alibu, and then Alibu at mail.com or something like that. So we don't care too much about the data, and here we see that we are displaying the new information. All right, so this is good. Now let's see how I can send information back, so in the different direction. So now the direction we explained, so it's parent child. Now let's see how I can send information from the child to the parent. Alright, so let's see how we can do that. So now in order to show you how we can communicate from a child to the parent, this means how we can send an event or how we can inform the parent that something happened in here and the parent needs to react. So in this case, let's first add a small functionality. Let's add a delete button right here or a delete link in order to be able to remove one element, for example. So in here, all I will need to do is using a button, for example, and then I will give it type button and I will just call it delete. We don't care too much about the UI, so this is how it's gonna look like. So we will have this delete button, and when I click on this delete button, I want to remove this element from this list. So imagine we have many elements, so in each time I click on delete, I want to delete this element. But before that, we will need another input. So the second input that we need, other from the message, so we need the index. So the index is of type number, and let's initialize it to -1, for example, and then we need to make it an input. So then we need to go back to the parent, which is my first component, and then we need to pass a second input. Now you know how to do that, and it's called index, and the index is the I or the index that we have right here. All right. So now we have all the elements ready, and now let's go ahead and let me explain to you how we can send events from the child to the parent. Alright, now if we go back to message details component, first I need to add an event or a click event to my button right here. So here to add an event, it's simple. So it's click and then let's say delete or on delete, for example. And then within this on delete, so let's create the method because we don't have it yet. And when I click on the delete button that we recently added, I want to send an event to the parent. All right, so now we have everything ready. So the first thing that we need to do is to use the output annotation. So this output annotation means that we want to send an event from the child to the parent of that component. And then we need to declare a variable. So let's call it delete, for example. And this delete will be of type event emitter. So this event emitter, and it comes from the Angular core package. So it's a generic type or a generic interface that we can pass anything or any value that we want. So for example, we can even pass a number, we can pass a string, we can pass even a complex object, or if we don't know or if we are not sure about the type that we want to send, we can set it to any, or we can set it to multiple types at the same time. So just for example, if I want to set it to a number or a string, I can do it in this way. So this means that this type right here can be a number or a string, but for our case, it's just a number. And then let me initialize it. So equals new event emitter. So this name right here is super important, and I will explain it just afterwards. So now all I need to do in this onDelete method, so this method, just to remind you, this is when we click on the delete button. All right. So when I click on the delete button, I need to inform the parent that something happened, and it happened with some data. So this dot delete, and then we have a method called emit. All right. So the emit, as you can see here, we have the value and it's of type number. So let's say emit and then this dot index. All right. So this means that I will send an event or I will notify the parent that something happened in the child. All right. So now how to intercept this one? So I will close these two classes because we are done from the child side. And then I will go to the parent, and in here, let me make it full screen. And then if I open a parenthesis, and then we see that already my IDE is proposing the first one, which is delete. So this delete, as you can see, it's even bold. So then I can use this method. So this delete, if I click on it, so if I do control and then click, you see that it will navigate me automatically to this output that I have in my child. So then here you need to choose like a good names for your events or for your actions in order to have it correctly and not to mix between it. So here, let's say delete message, for example, and then how to get the element or how to get the information that was sent. I mean this index, how to get this one. So it's easy. So all I need to do is to have $event. So when you specify $event, so this will take or will send the event from the delete or from the action from the child to the parent. So let's go ahead and create this delete message, and then let's call this one index. And here all I need to do is to do this dot messages dot splice, and then the start or the start number where I want to start deleting. So it's from index, and then I want to delete only one element. All right, so let's go ahead and try this implementation. So now the page will be refreshed automatically. So let's insert some dummy data, submit, submit, and submit. So for example, or let me refresh again. So this is the dummy data, and this is the second one, and this is the third one. All right, and let's add maybe another one. All right, so now, for example, if I want to delete this one, let's click on delete, and you see that it was successfully deleted. All right, so if I click or if I delete the first one, it's also deleted, and then you see that the Angular will update automatically the UI. All right, so with this example, we saw how we can communicate from a child to a parent. Now let's understand what are the services in an Angular application. So in Angular, services are reusable and injectable classes that provide functionality and data to components throughout an application. So services are responsible for handling tasks such as data retrieval from APIs, sharing between components, and performing business logic. Then, services are typically used to abstract way to implementation details of specific functionality, keeping the components lean and focused on their primary responsibilities, and they help promote code reusability, modularity, and testability. So now let's see how we can create and use a service. As usual, we can use the Angular CLI to generate a new service using the command ng generate service and then service name, or we can use the shortcuts ng gs and then service name. So these commands generate the necessary files of the service, including the service class and unit test file. So in the service class, define the required methods, properties, and business logic that the service needs to provide. You can also define properties to store and share data between components. Then you can use dependency injection, and it will be covered in the next section, to inject the service into the components that require its functionality. Dependency injection, or DI, is a core concept in Angular that helps manage the creation and injection of objects. So objects can be services, component, etc., into other objects that require them. So Angular dependency injection system provides the following benefits. So first, we have modularity. So dependencies can be managed and resolved independently, allowing for easier code organization and separation of concerns. Reusability. So services can be shared and reused across multiple components, reducing code duplication. And then testability. So dependencies can be easily mocked or replaced during testing, enabling effective unit testing. And finally, loose coupling. So components and services depend on abstractions or interfaces rather than concrete implementations, so resulting in loosely coupled code that is easier to maintain and modify. So now let's move on and see services and dependency injection in action. All right, now let's see services in action. So the first thing, let's see how we can create a new service. Now you need to pay attention, because when you do ng, g, and then s for service, and then the service name, for example, let's say my first service. So here, when you use this command right here, and we will execute it in the root folder of our application, it will be created under app. So let's execute the command and let me show you what will happen here and what I want to highlight. So as you can see here, we created two files, nothing else was updated. And here we have the file was created under src/app. So if I refresh this one, you see that we have two files. So my first service.service and my first service.service.spec.ts. So here, as you can see, we have the file named my first service. So when you want to create a service, you don't need to add the suffix service because it will be automatically added exactly like the component. The second thing, as you can see, for the components, when we create a component using the Angular CLI, it will automatically create a folder for that component, and the folder will have the same component name, but it's not the case for the service. So what we will do, I will delete these two files right here, and then I will recreate my service first without the suffix. And then also you can just give it the class name like this, or you can use also like everything as a lowercase with dashes. It also understands the same thing. So here, let's say services and then / my first, and it will create a folder. If it doesn't find any folder called services, it will create a folder for us, and then it will create the service called my first. So let's try this out. And as you can see here, now we have this folder services, and then we have the services inside it. So if I create a second one, for example, services, and then test, and then my first test, for example, and I hit enter, let's see what will happen in here. So here we see that it created another folder. So it creates the whole hierarchy if it doesn't exist. All right. So I will remove this one. It was just for us for testing. And then let's see how this service looks like. So I will open this my first service.ts. I will make it full screen. And as you can see here, it's just a simple class. So we have export class, my first service, and then we have this decorator. So this decorator is an injectable decorator. So this means that this class is a service and it might be injected. So this one might be handled using the dependency injection. So now let's break down this code and let's explain each part of it. So first of all, we have this injectable annotation, or it's also called within Angular, it's called a decorator. So the injectable decorator is used to indicate that a class is an Angular service. So Angular service are a way to encapsulate and provide common functionality data or utility methods that can be shared across different components and modules in your applications. So by adding this decorator, you inform Angular that the class can be injected as dependency in other classes. And then we see that inside this injectable, we have a property right here. So it's an object and it has a property called provided in. So the provided in property is used to specify the root injector of the service. So the root injector of the top level injector in the application, and when a service is provided in the root, there is a single instance of that service shared across the entire application. It is a shorthand way to provide in the service at the application level. The provided in property can have different values, each with its specific meaning. So first of all, it can be root. So this value indicates that the service should be provided at the root level, making it available as a singleton throughout the entire application. It is the recommended way to provide services that are used throughout your application and ensures that there is only one instance of the service. Also, other option, it might be any. So when we use any, so this value allows you to provide the service anywhere in the application, not just at the root level. This can be useful in certain situations where you want to provide the service at a more specific module or component level rather than the root. Also, it can be something like this. So if I say some module, so instead of using the root, you can specify the name of the module, and we took as an example some module to provide the service in that particular module's injector. So this is helpful when you want to limit services availability to a specific module and its component. Also, the value of this provided in can be null, and when you put it to null, this means something. So setting the provided in to null disables Angular automatic dependency injection for the service. So this means you need to manually provide the service in the modules providers array for it to be available to other components and services. And then we will see in action how this works. So we will create, or we will add some logic to this service, and we will see together what are the different ways to provide this service. And we'll mainly see the root one, and we will see when we make it as null, or if we completely remove this object and we keep only the injectable decorator. So stay with me and let's go ahead and try this out. So now the first thing that we will do some refactoring here to our my first comp, and we will move a little bit of this logic to our service. So this means I want to have an array in here. So I will say messages, and it will be an array of any. So let me make it full screen. So it will be an array of any value, and then equals something like this. And then I will create few methods. So first of all, I will create a method insert, and let's call it insert, and it will be a void. So this insert method, it will take a message as a parameter or as an input, and the message, it will be of type something like this. So here we will have a name of type string, and then email of type string. And finally, we can have also the message of type string. So here we are just defining the object that we want to have in order to insert it inside these messages. It's just a security, just to encapsulate and to force the typing, even if it's of type any. So here, just to insert, all we need to do is just this dot messages dot push, and then we need to push the new message that we will receive as a parameter. And then we will create another method, and we will call it get all messages, for example, and this is simply, it will return this dot messages. So this is just to fetch, and then what we need to do finally is delete message, for example. So we can imagine that this is interacting with an API, but for now it's just in memory, and here we will just say index of type number, and then it will be just a void. And what we need to do is this dot messages dot splice, and then we want to start from the index and remove only one element. Alright, so now we have our service ready to use. So let's go ahead and do some refactoring to our my first component and make sure that the application works as before. But before that, let's go ahead and create an init method. So here I will just create a new method. I will call it init, and it will be of type void. So this method will just insert few messages, 2 or 3 of them, to this table right here. So I will just do this dot insert, and we can use the message or the method that we just created. And here we have name, and let's say, for example, Ali or Alibu, and then we have email, and let's say here it's alibu@mail.com, and then we have message, and for example here, hello world. All right, so I will just duplicate this one 2 or 3 times, and here let's say, for example, John, and here John, and hello world, for example, John, just to have something visible like from the beginning. All right, so here hello world, and that's it. So also in order, if we want to insert or to initialize this data at the startup or at the initialization of our service, all we need to do is to call this method in the constructor. So if I do this dot init, so this method will be automatically called when we instantiate or when we inject this constructor. All right, so now let's move on and let's use the service in our component. In Angular, there are ways to inject a service into a component. So we have constructor injection, property injection, and each method has its benefits and use cases. So let's explain them one by one. So first, let's start with the constructor injection. So the constructor injection is the most common and recommended way to inject a service into a component. It involves declaring the service as a parameter in the component's constructor. When the component is created, Angular's dependency injection system automatically provides an instance of the service. And now let me show you how we can do constructor injection. So first of all, we need to add our constructor in here. So to create a constructor in TypeScript, all we need to do is to type constructor and parentheses and then these brackets right here. So now in order to inject, for example, my first service in this constructor, all I need to do, so first I will make it private because I only need the service to be available only in my TS file and not outside and the template, for example. So then private and then variable name, let's call it service, and then colon and then the type. So the type is my first service. So now we just injected the service in here. So now to demonstrate that this is working fine, we know that we have this object messages, and what I will do is simply in this constructor, so I will not add the init method, I can do that also in the constructor. So I will do this dot messages equals this dot service dot get all messages. So now if I refresh the page right here, we should see automatically that we have 3 lines. All right, so now if I refresh the page, well, for now we don't see that it's displayed, and this is because we are using this is submitted. So we can do it or we can initialize it in a different way. So this is submitted equals this dot messages dot length when it's strictly greater than 0. So now let's double check. We see that we have these 3 elements that we initialized in this init method previously, and the init method is already in the constructor of this my first service. So this is the first way of injecting a constructor. So now let's continue updating our code and let's rely 100% on this service right here. So here, instead of this dot messages dot push, I want to use this dot service dot insert, and I want to insert this value. So here, this one is insert and then the message. All right. So, and also for the delete, I want to use this dot service dot delete and then my index. And that's it. So now let's try and make sure that everything is also working fine. So for example, if I delete this John, we see that John is also deleted. And if, for example, let's try to insert something new, we see that also it gets inserted. So now we saw how we can do dependency injection using constructor. Now let's see how the property injection. But before that, let me tell you about the benefits of using constructor injection. So it makes the component's dependency clear and explicit, as you can see here, improving the code readability and maintainability. And then the service instance is available as soon as the component is constructed, ensuring that it is ready to use throughout the component's lifecycle. All right, so those are the benefits of constructor injection. Now let's move on and let's see how we can do property injection. Property injection involves declaring the service as a property in the component and using the inject method or decorator to specify the service to be injected. So Angular's dependency injection system will assign the service instance to the property. So in order to do that, we can move this property outside, and now we can just initialize it using the inject method. So we have a method called inject, and it is from the Angular core package, and then we need to provide the my first service service. And like this, in this way, we are injecting the my first service into this variable called service. So now if I refresh the page, I'm expecting to have the same functionality. So this is what we are expecting. So if I change something or I submit something new, we see that we have it right here. So this is about the property injection. Now let's bring our constructor injection back, and let me show you something which is super important and you might encounter while coding with Angular. So now all we need to do is to bring this back to the constructor, and we can make sure that the application is still working. So now if I go to my first service, and here we already explained before what are the different values of this provided in. So now I will completely remove this one and keep just the injectable decorator. And now let's refresh the page. So we see that the page is no longer working. So if I open the developer console, and let me make this one a bit bigger, we see that we have an exception already. So here we see that we have an exception called null injector error, and then it says that the my first service null injector, that it says that no provider for my first service. So this means that I don't have any service provided for me in order to inject it in my services or my first service. So in order to fix that, whether as we bring it as it was before and we provide it in root, so it will be provided in the root of our application, or we can simply go and open the app.module.ts. Let me make this one full screen. And then in the providers, here we are telling our Angular application that I want to provide a service at the application startup. So here, if I add my first service in here and then just refresh the page, you will see that it will work again because this one is also provided in here. So each time you face the null provider exception, this means that you are missing to provide a service. The service might be a third-party service or from a different library or even from a different module. So always keep in mind that you need to provide the service within the providers of your module. All right, now we understood very well how services work. Now let's move on and see what comes next. So now let's understand routes. So routing, Angular's routing module allows you to define and configure routes for different views or components in your application. So routing enables navigation between different pages or sections of your application without requiring a full page reload. So now let's go ahead and see how we can configure a route. So first of all, in the app routing module, we have here a table called route. So in the above example, we define an array of routes object. So each route object specifies a path and the corresponding component to be displayed when that path is navigated to. So the minimum required to define a route is the path and the component, and we can define multiple routes. So then we need, in order to use the configured routes, we need to import the app routing module in our root module application. So it's often called the app module, as we saw in the example above, and it includes the router outlet directive in your main template. The router outlet directive is a placeholder that renders the component associated with the active route. It acts as a viewport for the content of the routed component. So in your main component, mainly called app component, we need to include this directive, the router outlet. So to navigate between routes, Angular provides the router link directive, which allows you to create links to different routes in your application. So here's an example of using router link. So we can use it in this way. So we need to create an A tag and then use the router link and then the path where we want to navigate. Or we can use it in a different way. We provide it as an input, and as you can see, router link is now between brackets, and then we can pass the path, and also if we need to use parameters, we can also pass parameters, and it will be a path variable. Angular also provides a programmatic navigation. So to navigate programmatically in the component class, you can use the router service provided by Angular's router module, and we can use it in this way. So first we need to import the router from the package angular/router, and then within the component, all we need to do is to inject this router service, and then we need to use the instruction this.router.navigate and then the path fragment or the path segment that we want to navigate to. So in the next part, we will see all this in action. I will show you how to use routing, how to create new routes, and how to navigate in the different ways using router link, or programmatically how to navigate to different paths of your application. Before diving into the routing, let's first create a component and let's call it menu component. So this menu component will be the component that will contain two links, for example, one to the home and one to the about, or we can keep using the component that we have right now, and we can create another one. So let's go ahead and create this. So ngGC for component, and then let's call it menu, and then Angular CLI will create the component for us, and it will also update the corresponding files for that. So our component was created, and as we can see, it is right here. So I will provide you the code for that. You can see it also on the source code of this application. So without wasting a lot of time, I will show you how this menu is gonna look like. So simply, this menu component contains two links. The first one is like to the home, and the second one to the about page, for example. And here I have the CSS for that. So it's just a div and then a list, and then I just use TSS in order to make this menu looks good. So now, first of all, let's include this menu in our page right here. So to do that, you know already what needs to be done. Let's navigate to the app component.html page. I'm gonna make it full screen. So now I no longer need this P or this hello page, and instead I will be using the app menu component that I just created. So now if we navigate and if we refresh, we see that we have a nicely looking menu right here containing two links, home and about. You can add as many links as you need, but for now we will stick only to these two. Alright, so the home should always display this form right here, and the about will display another about page. So now let's go ahead and create the about page, and after that we will see how we can create routing, and we will see the different ways to route or to navigate between the different pages and links of our application. Now let's go ahead and create the about component. So instead of menu, I will create a component, call it about, and then I will put the code that I already prepared, and you will find all the code because it's not the topic or the main topic of this course. It's not about HTML and CSS. So I will provide you the link for the source code, and then you can use it in order to follow this course. So let's go to the about page, and I will paste all the information and all the HTML and CSS code in order to have a nicely looking page. Alright, so this is the final output of this about page. So it's just a simple page containing a title and then a bunch of paragraphs explaining what this course about. So it's about the Angular Crash Course and some description. And also I added some CSS to that. So as I mentioned, you can also find it in the source code of this application. So before we move forward, let me just show you what is the output or what is the result of this about page. So let's go to the app component, and then in the top, I will just try to show this app about component. And as you can see, it looks exactly like this. So now we can start creating routes and we can start navigating between the different components. Now let's go ahead and start creating routes. So in the app routing module.ts, let's open this file, and here we see that we have a constant called routes, and it's of type routes, and it equals an empty list. So let's quickly check what is the routes here. So the routes is a table of route, and if I click on control and navigate to this route, we see that we have a title, we have a path, we have also the path matcher component, and a list of other properties. So as I mentioned before, the most important two blocks of creating a route is the path and the component. So now let's create the first path. So it will be path, and then I will keep it empty. And for this one, or let's go for this one, let's go home and then components. And when I navigate to this home path, which component I want to render in here. So here, let's say my first component. So this is when we click on the home page. All right, so let's add a new one. So here it will be a path, and then let's call it about. So this will be the about page, and then component, and it will be the about component. So now we have two components. So I will just go back to my app component in here, and I will remove the app, my first component, just to have an empty page in here. So as you can see, here we have an empty page, and I will just add a title here, maybe just an H2, and let's say Angular crash course. Something like that, just to make it look nice. All right, so then if I go back here and if I put /home and hit enter, we see that this component, or my first app component, is getting rendered. So this is the component, and now if I navigate to about and hit enter, we see that we have this about. Okay, so I see that this Angular crash course is not looking nice, so I will just remove this title from here. And then we see that we have, or we are rendering the two pages that we have. So if I navigate back to home, we are displaying this page right here. But for when I click on home and about, both of them are not yet rendered. So I'm not able to navigate through the links. So let's go ahead and use the two ways. The first way is the programmatic way, and the second way is using the A link with the router link directive to navigate between components. So let's go ahead and do that. So the navigation will be done in the menu component. So I will close these two files and then open the menu components. And in here we have the first link, which is ahref, navigating to the home. And for this one, I will use router link and then equals, and then I will do /home. So now if I go back here and click on home, we see that we are loading the home page. Now I want to programmatically navigate to the about page. So in order to do that, let me put this in full screen. So in order to do this, first, I will remove this hashtag from here, and I will use JavaScript and then colon and then void and then 0 as a parameter. So this means that when I click on this link right here, it will do nothing. Okay, so then I need to add a click event, and then let's call it navigate to about. I will just inline these lines so you can see everything. And then yet we don't have this method, so I will just create the method navigate to about. So then, as I mentioned before, in order to navigate programmatically, we need to inject the router service. So now you also know how to inject services. I need to create a constructor, and then I will create a private router of type router. So as you can see, the router is from the package angular/router. And then I will be able to use this router in my navigate to about method. So I will do this .router dot navigate, and then I need to provide as a list the path fragments of my path. So here I want to navigate to the about page. So as you can see here, I don't need to put the slash because Angular will automatically concatenate that. So now if I go back here and I click on the about, we see that we are now navigating to the about page and we are displaying this nicely looking test. If I click again on home, we are again navigating to the home page. So now our application is having a really nice shape. We have a menu, we can navigate between the different components and so forth. Now there is a really nice and interesting part that we will see next, which is how to consume an API. So if I have an API, for example, returning the list of products, for example, I want to consume this API and display the data in my application. So let's go ahead and do that, and let's understand what is HttpClient, how to do that, and so forth. Before moving any further, let's first see something which is really important about routes. So let's see how we can pass parameters in the path and also query parameters, and how we can intercept that, how we can get this information and also display them in our application. So in order to do that, let's first go to the about page, and here I will just add one small thing. So in this about page, I will add a message. So let's say it's an h3, and here let's say hello parameter, and then I will create a parameter. So here just I will create a variable, call it param. For now I don't have it, so I will ask my IDE to create this field for me. So I will create a field param. For now I will make it of type any, and let me show you how we can pass information, or how we can get the information from the URL. So the first thing that we will see is how to pass a path variable. A path variable is in this way. So it's, for example, localhost 4200 /about/alibu, something like that. So this is a path variable. And in order to do that, we need to create a new route for it. So let's go to the routing module, and then all I need to do, let me make it full screen. So all I need to do is to duplicate this route, because in this about route, I might have a parameter. Let's call it user name, for example. So in order to mention to Angular and to make it understand that this is a path variable, all I need to do is to add colon and then the variable name. So in this case, I want to pass a variable called username. So now let's go back to our about component, and in here in this TS file, let's see how we can get the parameter. So first I need the constructor, and for the constructor I need to inject a service. So private, and the service is called the activated route. So the activated route is also of type activated route. So let me fix this typo. And this activated route is the current active route of my application. So for example, if I do /about/alibu, for example, so we see here that we have in this route this parameter alibu. All right, so now let me show you how we can get this one. So also for this, I can do all the job in the constructor, but let me show you how we can do it in the ng-on-init method. So in order to do that, I need to implement the on-init interface. So as you can see here, implement on-init, and this will ask me to implement all members, which is the ng-on-init method. So I will just create or override or implement this method in my class. Then the first thing that I will do is this .activatedRoute.log. Let's analyze what we have as information in this activated route. So now I will just make this one a bit bigger. I will display the developer console, and then I will refresh the page. And then if you are not in the info, just go ahead and click on the info right here. And here we see that we are logging the activated route. So if I expand this, we see a bunch of information right here. So I'm gonna make this one a bit bigger and zoom in. So here we see that we have a lot of information, and among this information we have a snapshot. So for the snapshot, we have the component. So this is the about component. Data, we have empty data. We don't have any fragments. And the outlet is primary. So the outlet, this refers to the router outlet tag or directive we are using in the app component. And then we see that we have params and query params. So you already have the answer for the next part, but let's focus on params right now. So for the params, we see that we have a map containing key value. So the key is the username that we specified in the app routing module, and the value is the value from the URL right here. All right. So now I guess you understand how we can get the information. So it's activated route dot snapshot dot params, and then we can access the username or the parameter called username in order to display it in our page. So let's close this one and go back to our IDE and try to display the name. All right, now all I need to do is this dot param equals this dot activated route dot snapshot dot params, and then the parameter name. It's like accessing a JSON element, so we called it username. All right. So now if I go back and refresh the page right here, you will see that it will display hello parameter and then Alibu. So this is what we see in here. So this is how you can get a parameter from the path. So just to remind you and to resume this part. So first thing we need to do is to create a route containing this parameter. So for example, if I want to get any parameter in the about page or in the about component, I need to duplicate and create a second route, and then about slash and then colon and then the parameter name. So I hope this one was clear. Let's move on and let me show you how to get query params. So again, within the about page, we will try to pass and to read query params. So for that, we don't need to update anything from the app routing module because query params, they don't require any special path. So now a query param is, for example, something. So here we have the slash about slash alibu, and then I can pass another parameter using the interrogation mark and then the param name. So let's say last name, for example, equals Bu Ali, and then if we want to pass another one, all we need to do is add the and symbol, and then parameter name equals value, and so forth. So here, let's say course equals Angular. So if I refresh the page, we see that we still have these params right here, but now let's see how we can read it. So before that, I will just open the console and let's see what we have as information. So this is our activated route. And now if I expand it and I go again to the snapshot, we see right here in the params, we have the username, and now we have another object called query params. So it's a course and last name as mentioned in here. So this is how we can read it. Now you know the information. Let's go ahead and do it. All right, so I will create another parameter. I will call it query param of type any. And now all I need to do is this dot query param equals this dot activated route dot snapshot dot query params, and then the parameter name. So in this case, so let me just inline this one so you can see everything. And then the query param, let's say course, for example, and now I will display this course in my HTML page. So I will just duplicate this one, and here I will say course and then query param. Now if I refresh the page, you see that the course is Angular. So for example, if I change the course to Spring and refresh, you see that we have Spring right now. So I hope that was easy. I hope you understood how we can pass and how we can read parameters from the path and also the query params. Now let's just clean up the code because we don't need to see this in here, and then the same thing in the component. So let's just do some cleanup and then let's move on to the next part. To better understand how to communicate and how to consume REST APIs and how to play with HTTP client module, we need absolutely a REST API. And for that, we won't be creating any API our own or starting something locally. What we will need to do is just to check one of the fake REST APIs. And one of the available ones is the fake API store, is the fake store api.com. So all you need to do is to go to this website right here, and you will find this nicely looking documentation where you can see all the different features of this API. So it covers products, cart, users, and even login. So you can do almost everything with this fake store API. So this is what we'll be using for the next part, and also we will build a UI for this fake store API. So this means like we will fetch the product, we will display them, we will display a single product, and so on and so forth. And I will show you how to do that. So are you excited? Let's go ahead and do it. So the first thing that we need to do is to create a new service. So let's go ahead and do that. So we will be using the Angular CLI to do that. So it will be ngg service, and then I will create in services, I will create a folder, I will call it API, and then I will create the first service, which is, let's call it product service. So I will create a folder, call it products, and then I will call a service and I will call it product, and then it will automatically add service as a suffix, and it will be named product service. So now we just missed the slash in the end, so now it will create as a product service. And as you can see here, so let's go ahead and explore. So we have API, and then we have products, and then product service. So now in the next part, let's move on and let's implement a few methods to consume the REST API. So as I mentioned before, we will be using the fake store API in order to consume this data and display it. So here we have the get all products, we have get single product, but I will be using the limit results because maybe getting all the products will return a huge list of products, but we want a limited one. So let's copy this one, and now let's go back to our code and start implementing this, and I will guide you step by step how to consume a REST API. So now the first thing that I will do, I will create a variable and I will call it base URL equals the value that I just copied, and then I will remove this part just to keep this base URL. All right, so this is the base URL of our API. So all we need to do is to have this base URL and then concatenate it with different endpoints in order to consume the different endpoints. So now let's first start by creating a method get. So let's call it get all products with limit, for example, and then we can have a limit of type number, and we can, for example, assign it to 5, so it will be the default value even if we don't pass this limit variable. So then what we need to do, I will create a constant, I will call it products URL equals this dot base URL, and then I will concatenate it with the rest of this one. So the final product URL will be https:/fakestoreapi.com/products/limit equals, and then we can concatenate it with 5. So this is one way to do that. Also, there is another way which is nice and better to concatenate strings is the following. So I will just duplicate this one and I will call it products URL2, and here all I need to do is to use the back simple colon, and it's like this. So here all I need to do in order to make Angular or TypeScript understand that this is a variable, I need to wrap it in a dollar and then brackets. So like this, Angular will understand and TypeScript will understand that this is a parameter and this is like an attribute in this class. So as you can see, it points directly to here. The same I will do it for the limits. So dollar and then brackets and then for limit. Now I would say it's better to use this one. It's more understandable and more readable. And let's call this one, let's bring the original name and let's call it product URL. All right, So now in order to make calls and in order to consume REST APIs, we need to inject some service. And the service we need to inject is called HttpClient. So Angular's HttpClient is a powerful built-in module that allows you to interact with APIs and make HTTP requests from your Angular application. So it simplifies the process of making a synchronous call to servers and handling the responses. So the HttpClient module is part of the Angular Common HTTP package, and it's included in your Angular project by default when you create a new application. So there is no need to add any third party. And in order to do that, so I will just create or inject the service. I will call it HTTP, and as I mentioned, it's of type HTTP client. All right, so this is all we need to do. Now we just can use this HTTP client attribute in order to consume or to get this data. So what I will be doing, I will do this.http, and then we have, as we can see here, we have a bunch of methods. So we have get, put, head, delete, JSONP, options, patch, post, and request. All right. So since our request from the documentation is a get request, so let's use the get. So this get takes as a parameter a URL. So I will be using the product's URL in order to consume the data. So here there is something important that I need to mention, that the return type of this get method is an observable. So here, as you can see, this is an observable, and this is part of the publish subscribe pattern. So when you have an observable, you need to subscribe to it, or you need to transform it to a promise and await the result. So now, instead of returning a void for our method, let's return this observable. And now, as you can see here, the type has changed of this get all products with limit. So here we have this observable, and as you can see, the observable is of type object, and also this get method is a generic one, and as you can see, it's by default it's object, but now let's do it, or let's make it of type any. Okay, so when I change it here, it's also automatically changing here. So by the way, this one is not, this observable of type any is automatically added by the IDE. I didn't type anything here, but the IDE detected that this is an observable, or the return type of the get is an observable, and after mentioning any here, so it's also mentioning any in here. All right, so now let's go ahead and in one of our UIs, let's just consume this first service. So in order to do that, I will go to one of the components. Let's say, okay, let's do it in the about component, and in here, all I need to do, I need to create my constructor, and then I need to inject my product service. So I will call it private service of type product service, and then I will need the ng on init. So I will implement the on init interface, and of course I need to implement all the members. So I will implement the ng on init method, and then in this ng on init method, I will do this dot service dot get all products with limit, and here I can even skip passing the limit because it has a default value. So then, as I mentioned before, it's an observable, and in order to send the request, we need to subscribe to this one. All right, so after subscribing, it will return an observable as next, and here first we have a next, and the next will return some data. So this is just a name, it's nothing more. So you can call it data, you can call it result, you can call it whatever you want. So I will add the semicolon here, and then I will just do data.log. I will log this information, and let's see it in the console. So now all we need to do is to go to our browser, refresh the about page, and see the result. So now I have my browser, and when I click on the about link, we see that we have one exception. So the exception says that uncaught exception, and so on and so forth. So here, even if I try to navigate using the URL, we see that we have this exception. So we have the exception null injector error, and then we have a null injection on the product service, and then HTTP client. So I know, and I guess now you understand why we have this issue. So let's go ahead and fix it. So the problem here, as you know, is that we don't provide any service of type HTTP client. So let's go in here. So I will just inline this one, and also in the providers, I will add HTTP client service as a provider. Since here, if you go to this HTTP client, we don't have any providers. Okay, so it's not provided in the root. This is what I mean. All right, so now we provided our HTTP client. Let's go back and refresh our page and see what will happen. So in the same way, we still have the same exception. So here you might ask, what is the problem? So the problem is we provided the HTTP client service, but we did not import the corresponding module. So now if we go back in here, there is a module called HTTP client module, as you can see it in here, that we need to import it, which provides and which brings with it the HTTP client now. So now if I go back to my page and refresh it, I will see the result and the output of my request. If I click on the about, so first the about is working, and then we just have a 404, and we just need to check why we have this. So in order to do that, all we need to do is to go to this network tab, and we will see all the HTTP requests that we are making in here. So I will click on this, and let's just check what is the problem. So the problem that we have right here, we have a wrong URL. So the URL is fakestoreapi.com/this %20 plus %20/products. So we just made a typo when we created our link. So now if I go back to my product service, and if I check this one, you see that I have this plus that I forgot to remove. So now everything is fine, and the query should work and should return some data. So let's go ahead and go back to the browser and try it again. So now it's making the request, and as you can see, we have products and we have limit 5. So here, if I go back to the console and click on the info, we see that we have the result that we fetched. Okay, so here we have it's men clothing, description, we have an ID, we have a price, we have an image. So for example, even if I open this image in a new tab, you will see that it's returning a nice image. Okay, so this is the image that is returned. And then if I go back, we have all the other details, we have ratings, we have it's a really nice API, we can use it. So now if I go also to the network, and let's try to check the result. So here we have the header. So this is the header of our request. Here we have the URL, and this is the request method. It's a get, and then we have the status code. This is 200 means okay, and as you can see, it's green. And we also have the response and the request headers. Then if you have a payload, you will see the payload right here. So in this case, we have the payload, which is the limit, the query parameter that we sent, and its limit equals 5. And then we have a preview. So the preview is the response that we get from this API. And as you can see in here, we have category, description, ID, and it's the same one we just console logged in our console. And then you have also the response. So this is the response, but it's just in plain. And then you have the initiator and the timing, how was the time, or what was the time to consume and to get the result from this API. All right, so it's really as simple as that. Now let's move on and let's create another method. Let's post some data, and let me show you, even before posting data, how we can enhance this code and how the result looks better. Because as you saw in here, we just have a list, and even in the code we just have an observable of any. But what if I want to use directly this object in here? For example, all I need to do is to do data dot, but I don't have any fields, I don't know the fields. So what I need to do, I need each time to go back to the documentation of this REST API and check the ID. So I have category, description, ID, image, and so on and so forth. So let me show you how we can do it in a better way. So now what we need to do next is to create a representation for this product. So we will create an object or a class representing all the information that we have in here. So it will contain a field category, description, ID, image, price, and another object rating and a title. So let's go ahead and do that. So first let me remove this line, and then I can open in here, and in this product and this in this folder API, I will create another package or a directory, and I will call it models. So here I need to create a model for my product. So I will right click here, new file, and then I will call it product-representation, because it will be the representation of my product.ts. So I want to create a TypeScript file, and then this product will be an interface. So all I need to do is export interface and then product representation. Let's open the brackets, and in here all we need to do is to put all the fields that we have. So let me make it full screen, and then I can go back to the browser, and from this one all I need to do, I can copy all this data from here, and then I will just extract the objects that I need. So I will just paste them in here, and then I will just perform a cleanup. So now I have the fields that I want. It's ID, title, description, category, and image. And then I added this interrogation mark to say that this field is optional, and even if I don't have it, it's not a problem, it can be null. So now I will just assign the types of each field. So the ID is of type number, the title is of type string, same for the description, it's also a string, category it's also a string, and the image URL it's also again a string, and the price will be of type number. So now I have my representation of the product, but I'm just missing the rating, which is also another object. So as we can see here, this rating, I can copy this one, and I will create a representation for the rating. So let's go back, and in here I will create a new model. So it will be rating representation.ts, and then again I will export an interface, and I will call it rating representation, and I will paste what I copied in here. So here I don't need this rating name. All I need to have is rate and count. So the rate will be also optional and of type number. The same for the count, it will be of type number. So here you need to be careful, you need to have the same namings in here. Also the count, I can make it optional. So now if I go back to the product, I need to add another field. I will call it rating, and it will be optional and of type rating representation. And that's it. Now I have the product representation. I can go back to my service and change this, and let's see what will happen after this change. So now if we go back to our product service.ts file, and then in this get method right here, and get all products with limit. So here we see that we have the http.get, and it's of type any. So now all I need to do is to change the type any to product representation, and this is all I need to do. And then if I go back to the about component, we see that now the data is of type product representation. But there is one small detail is still missing, because this get will return a list of product representation. So here we have two options, whether to make it like this, so it will be a table or a list of product representation, or we can use array of product representation. And then if I go back again to my about component.ts, we see that this product representation is now a list. So for example, if I do data and then get the first element, and then I do dot, we see that we have access to all the fields and properties of our product representation. All right, so let's go back to our browser and check that this is still working. So now after refreshing the page, we see that we have a list of products, and then if I expand it, we see that we still have the same representation in here. Also, if I go to the network, products, and then we see that we have the information that we got. And now we will be able to use this product representation as an object in our code to make our life easier. So the application is still working, we don't have any issues, we don't have any errors. So let's move on and let me show you now how you can post data. So to post a product or to create a new product, all we need to do first, we need to go back to the fakestoreapi.com and then click on the link add new product. So it will give you this example right here. So what we have is this URL to post the product, and then we need to pass an object of type product so that the object contains title, price, description, image, and category. So here you need to note that if you send an object like the code above, it will return an object with a new ID. And here remember that nothing is real, will insert into the database. So if you want to access the new ID, you will get a 404 error. So even you post, it will return a success, but you will not be able to access this new product, okay, because it's just a fake API. And here we can see also the output, it will return an object just like this. So now let's go back to our IDE and let's try this out. So the first thing that I need to do, I need to go to the product service and let's create a new method. Let's call it create product. And this create product needs to get or to have as a parameter the product that we want to persist. So here we have two options. Whether we can use the same product representation, but we don't need to pass the ID and the rating since it's not part of the payload that we see in here. So here we know we need just title, price, description, image, and category. But we have also another option is to create a product request, for example, and put all the information and only the information that we need in order to do that. So here I will leave the choice for you, but for now, just not to make this thing too long, we will use the same product representation. All right, so here I will just pass an object of type, I will call it product, of type product representation. And then what I will be doing, simply I will first create a product URL. So I will just copy this one, paste it in here. So it will be the base URL / products. And then I don't have any limits. I don't have anything else. And then what I need to do is return this.http.post. And then we have a method called post, and it takes a URL as a string and a body as any. And then it will return also an observable. So if I post here and I use the product URL and then the product object that I have and then semicolon, and here also I can give it a type. So the return type, it will be also a product representation. All right. So here now we will be able to perform a post request to our API. And to test this one, let's go back to our about component and let's replace this one with the new object that we want to do. So I will just remove this one and then I will create a const product, an object I will call it product of type product representation equals, and then I will just assign the values that I need. So here we mentioned that we need the title, and the title, let's make it my product. We need the description, let's call it product description. And then we need the price. So the price, let's say it's 12. Then category. So for the category, we can say any category. And finally, we need an image. So for the image, let's say just https://some-image.jpg, for example. It's just the URL of our image. So now I need to do this.service.create_product, and then I need to pass my product as a parameter. And of course, don't forget to subscribe since it returns an observable. And then let's open the brackets, and here we have the next. So the next, it will return data or a result. So you can call the variable anything you want. And then you see here that the data or the result. So let's call it result, maybe to make it more significant. So the result will be also of type product representation. So here, all I need to do is result.log. Now let's go back to our browser and let's test this and see the output. Alright, so here first we see that we have this nice log, and we have the category that we created, the description, and we have a new ID, the image, and the title. Again, if I go to the network and I see that I have this product, and now I'm using this URL and it's a post request, and it returned a 200 OK. Alright, so if I check the payload, we see this is the payload that we are sending. So it's category, description, image, price, and title. And now we have the preview, which is the result that was returned by this post request. So we have the category, any category, product description, the image, the price, title, and this is the ID that was created by the API. So in this way, we can create a post method, and it works exactly the same for put, delete, and all the other different methods. When making HTTP requests, it's essential to handle errors that may occur during the process, such as network failures or server errors. In Angular's HTTP client, we can handle errors using the subscribe method second argument, which is the error callback function. So the error callback receives an HTTP error response object which contains information about the error, including the status code, error message, and any error data returned by the server. So now let's see how we can handle these errors. So here we have the object next. So this is the result of our request. And then we can add another object, which is error. And here it will be of type error. And the error is mainly of type HTTP error response. So now let's try just try to handle this error response. So here don't forget the error function. So here all I will do is this is just error.log. And now to make our create product function returns an error, I will go to the product function and I will just mess up this URL. So it's a wrong URL. Now if I go back to the browser, we will see that we will catch the error. So again, if I go to the console and wait for the result of the execution, we see that we have this HTTP error. And then we have, this is the error. So it's like a page. And then we have headers, we have the message, and the message says HTTP failure response from this URL. And the error is 404. And also we have the name, we have the status, we have the status text, and so forth. So this is like one way to handle the error, and then we can play with this data the way we want. So here in this about, for example, when we catch an error, we can add small logic to it. So for example, here we can determine, or we can check what is the type of the error. So here, for example, we can do if my error is instance of, and then error event. So if it's the case, so this is just a simple error occurred. Otherwise, we can also display the error code that was returned by the server. So here, let's just console.error, and then let's display message and error occurred. And then we can display the error and then message. All right, else we can do, or we can display another error message. So this one will be the server side error. Okay, so server side error here just for reference, and then for that we can just paste a message, or like we can just tell the message. So server returns status code, and we can display the status code, and also we can display the error message. So we can do it in this way. So console.error and server returns status code, and then we can get the status code and the error message. So let's go ahead and try this out and see what will happen. And then for the UI, for example, before trying this out, you can catch these errors and display them directly in the UI. So now if I go to the errors, we see that we have server returned status code 404, and the error message is failure, HTTP failure response for this URL, because it's just a 404. So this is a way how we can handle the HTTP error messages and the HTTP failures in our REST API. All right, that's nice. You made it this far. So now we have all the building blocks and all the details how to build an Angular application. So let's concretize all what we learned in this course, and let's now build an application using the fake store API, and let's display the product, create a new product, and so forth, and even deleting products. And let's go ahead and do it. So the first thing that we need to do, let's first extend our menu right here, and let's have new elements. So I will open the menu, and then what I will be doing, I will just duplicate this one 2 times. So here I will just add a plus button. So this is the one to create a new product, and then we have home, and then we have the list of products, and then I will just navigate to products from here, and then for example let's say new dash product for this one, and let's see the output of my new menu. So here we have this plus button to create a new product, home, and then the list of the products, and again the about page. So the home is the menu, so is the form we created before, so let's keep it just in case, or we can even just clean it later on. And here we create a new component products, and then we have the about page. So that's nice, we have the menu ready. Let's go ahead and create the products page. So what we need to do now is open our terminal, and let's create a new component, and let's call it product, or let's call it products. So it's also fine. So I will click enter, and then we will have the products. And here, just to remind you, each time you add a new product and it's supposed to be a page, don't forget to add the routing. So let's go ahead and let's add the routing. So in the app routing module, let's extend this one, and let's add a new route. So here, all I need to do is my path, and then it will be products, and then the component, it's products component.ts. All right, so now let's make sure that this works. So here, if I click on products, I see that products work, and this is perfect. So now let's go ahead and implement the products. So in order to display the products, what I will be doing, I will create a component. I will call it product details. So, or product representation, it will be just a component just to display the product, one single product, and then we will loop over the list of products that we will get from our API and display it in the products page. So here we have product details. I already prepared the HTML for that, so I don't want to waste your time. So I will show you how it looks like. So this is the code for our product details component. So it's just a product card, and we will display the image in the top, and then we will have the list of the attributes and the properties that we need to display for our product. And then we have the rating. So now let me show you also the CSS. So this is the CSS, and then you can check it in the source code later on. And now let me show you if I add this element to my products. So here, if I do app product details, and here we can see how it looks like. So it's just a card with the image, and we have the details right here. So for example, if I duplicate it many times, you see that it looks exactly like this. All right, so now let's go ahead and implement our product details. So for our product details, what we need to do, we need to have, of course, one input in here, and the input will be of type product representation. So let's call it product, and it's of type product representation, and let's initialize it to an empty object. So this is all we need to do, and then we can go to the HTML page, and then just all we need to do also is just to point this data. So here, like on purpose, I made it like that. So all I need to do is to add the curly brackets here and curly brackets here, also the same way in here, and also the same for the product category. And now for the rating, it will be product.rating.rate, and then here we have the count. So it will be product.rating.count. So this is how many reviews we have, and here we have the price, and we have everything. So now for the image source, we can use something like this, and then it will be, this one will be the product.image. And then for the alt, also it will be product.title, and we can make it in this way. And here we can say attribute.alt, and it's like this. All right, so now we have our product details ready to use. Next, all we need to do is we need to go to the products page and just make the service call, consume the API, and display the data. All right, so now we need to display the data. So what I can do, we already have the code in the about page. So I will just be copying all this code, including the constructor. I will cut it from here. I will also just copy it in the wrong way. I missed a part. So let's copy, or let's cut all this. And also we don't need the on init anymore. Let's optimize the imports. And now the about page is ready. And it was as before. So now let's go back to the products, and then in the product components, first I need to implement the on init, and then I just need to paste the code we have in here. But first we need to double check. Yes, so here we need to fix this one. So now we have our service ready to use. So what we need to do, instead of creating a product, I want to consume the product, or I want to fetch the list of products. So here, let's call the get all products with limits. So we don't need the limit because it's by default 5. And then we have a subscribe. Also, we can keep, or we can even ignore the error part, because we are sure and we know that our REST API will return something. And here, in order to display the list of the products, what I need to do, I need to create a list or a variable where I need to store my products. So I will say products is of type product representation, and it's a table, and I will initialize it to an empty table right here. So then after subscribing and getting the result, instead of console logging, I will do these dot products equals the data or the result. So now when the application loads and when this products component is ready, it will, on the init, it will retrieve all the products with the limit 5, and then it will subscribe to it, and it will store the products in here. So now what I need to do next is just go to the products component HTML, and here all I need to do is to use my app product details and then loop over it. So I will be using the ng4 directive equals, then let product of products. And then what I need to do is just to pass the product input as a value to this one. So now when we refresh the page, first we have this small issue, and this is due to the product details. And if I go to the product details component.html, it's because of this rating, and because this rating in here, this object rating might be null. So first we can fix it using this, and also we can do it in this way. And here we see that we no longer have this issue, but let's check what is the problem. So now we have these details, and we have this nicely looking product page. So here we see that we have, this is the title. Also, we see here the price, the description, and we have the reviews, like the rating and the reviews for this product. All right, so the products page is ready now. So let's go ahead and create the page for creating a new product. All right, now let's create a new component, and let's call it new product. So I will use the CLI again, and I will call my component new product. So let's hit enter. And then, as you know, the first thing we need to do, if this product is meant to be a page or a separate page, we need to think about the routing. Yes, that's it. So now let's go to the app routing module, and here we have product. I will just duplicate this one, and here I will just call it new dash product, and here I will use the new product component. So now I have my page ready, and the route is also ready. So now if I click on this plus button, I'm expecting to see the new product works. Okay, so if I click on this one, so let's check the menu if we already have the link or the correct link for it. And then we have the new product works. Alright, so now I will also again provide you the HTML for this new product form, and I will explain it just in a second, and I will show you how it looks like. Alright, so this is the final output of our product page. So here we have the title, price, description, image URL, and category, and we have our save button. So now let's move on and let's implement and do the binding between the product representation and this page, and then let's implement the save button. Now let's implement the new product functionality. So first we need to go to the TS file, and the first thing that we need to do is to create an object of type product representation. So I will call it product, and it will be of type product representation. And then I will initialize it to an empty object, and then I will go back to the HTML page and do the binding for the product and the different inputs. So here, for the input, for each input, I need to map it to the corresponding attribute of my product representation. So here, I will be using the ng model equals and then product.name, for example, for this one. It's product.title, and I will copy paste it and use the same one for the rest. So then here we have the price, so it will be product.price, then it will be product.description, and after that we will use the image URL, and then the category, and finally we have the submit button. So now we performed the mapping, or we also call it the binding, between this product object and different fields. Then we need to add a method, the ng on submit, and here let's call it create or save product. So I will go for save product. Now we don't have the method, so let's go ahead and create it. So here, in order to save the product, all I need to do is to add my constructor and then inject the product service. So I will call it service as a short name, and it will be of type product service. And then in order to save the product, all I need to do is this dot product or this dot service dot create product, and we know that the create product takes a product as an object, so we will be using this dot product. So then in order to perform this action, we need to subscribe to this event, and then what we have the next. So the next we will have our result, and then arrow function, and once we get the result and once the product is saved, I want to redirect the user to the products page. So to do that, you know already how to navigate programmatically, so I need to inject my router service, and then it will be of type router, and once I get the result, I will do this dot router dot navigate, and then I need to pass the path fragment. So once the product is saved, I want to navigate the user back to the products page, and that's it. So now let's go ahead and test this part. Alright, so now I will just put a title here and a price and a description and the image URL. So it's just a fake API, so I can put anything in here. So image URL, and then the category, let's say for example cat, and then I will hit the save button, and you see that the product was saved. And since it's a fake API, so we won't see the product as it was mentioned in the documentation of this API. Alright, so now we have our application functioning and running really nice. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope now you have a better understanding of the Angular framework. So I would like to leave me in the comments what you want to see next about this amazing framework. Again, I want to remind you before we leave, don't forget to check my website for premium courses, and also don't forget to give me a thumbs up and to subscribe to the channel if you are new. Also, I would like to ask you to help me grow this channel to reach more and more people. Thank you so much, and see you next time.